How much, ladies and gentlemen, are fish and chips where you come from? We'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish, chips and peas, £7.50. It's the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips in Leeds, it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us carry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10p, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12.60. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks ago.
How much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you and welcome to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DB Plus Radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connect device, fabulous to have you company today. Another beautiful sunny day. But of course, yesterday was Liberation Day in the States. It's when global markets now sharply falling as a result of Donald Trump's announcement of tariffs in the Oval Office. Well, apologies, not the Oval Office, in the Rose Garden last night. He vowed to stop the US being, he said, pillaged, raped, brutalised and looted by other countries. He unveiled what he called reciprocal tariffs on all countries. The baseline is 10%. That's the lowest anyone's getting. And he called it a declaration of economic independence. Loud cheers from many of the MAGA crowd. Many of the manufacturing workers who joined him at that announcement. Thanks to Brexit, and yes, it is thanks to Brexit, we're no longer in the EU. Britain escaped the worst of the tariff blitz. The EU faces 20% tariffs. We face just a 10% tariff, but it is still enough to cost us jobs. So anyone cheering about that today, frankly, is not paying attention. Also, we're going to be talking about an Al-Qaeda terrorist extraordinarily linked to the 7/7 attacks, which saw dozens of deaths on London streets and on the tube and bus. It's set to walk free in Britain, despite police saying he remains a risk. While jailed in the US in 2022, the terrorist Haroon Aswad told a British psychiatrist, "I am a terrorist," and said he would kill Jews, Christians and Muslim enemies. But yes, by all means, let's set him free on the streets. That seems like a good idea, doesn't it? We really are an incredibly stupid country when it comes to these issues. Also, thousands of European women, so European nationals living here in the UK, are returning back to their home countries in order to give birth. Now, is it because they don't trust the NHS? They get better healthcare in Poland or Romania or elsewhere? But either way, entitled to do that. But they're claiming the costs on the NHS. In total, 4,000 women cost the NHS over 3 million quid over the past 5 years, having their births paid for, reciprocal arrangements with the NHS by us, even though they weren't abroad. We'll talk about all of that and plenty more besides coming up on the show. Delighted to say, joining me on the show today is Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer, but I have to say, talking to him both on and off air over the years, he knows everything about everything. I'm going to be that straight. He just knows everything about everything. We have so much to talk about today. Before we get into it, and I've certainly, Mike and I don't agree on our views when it comes to what's happened, the announcement yesterday, but I also don't sign up to the hysteria. The world's falling in because of this tariff announcement. I think, frankly, a grenade has been lobbed in to the World Economic Order, and we won't really know for a little while until the smoke clears what the result will be, because there are many different outcomes. But I want to ask you what you make of those announcements yesterday. Thanks to Brexit, Britain escaped the worst of the Trump tariffs, with the UK getting 10% tariffs. That's basically the base. That's the lowest. That's what most of the world has got. While the EU, crucially, faces 20%. I want to know your reaction to that in particular, but your general reaction to tariffs. Do you think this is a tariff war that's going to end in tears for everyone and a world economic recession? Or do you think actually this is Donald Trump doing what he should be doing for American workers, American industry, trying to bring back industry onshore? Because it's all very well having free trade and comparative advantage and all these economic theories, but actually it's often workers in the countries which lose out because they're not the lowest paid in the competitive race who end up losing their jobs. Is this the sort of thing you want our Prime Minister to do? What should Keir Starmer do in return? We asked you a lot about that yesterday before we even found out what the tariffs would be. Love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk, then your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. And don't forget, of course, that calls are charged at the national rate and text costs £1 standard network rate message. Right, well, let's get to it, Philip. I have to say, I mean, it was an amazing piece of political theatre last night in the Rose Garden.
Donald Trump do something?
Basically all news now is Donald Trump did something, isn't it? He said he was going to do it. He made the announcement. He called it Liberation Day. And the way he's selling this is a declaration of economic independence. He talked about how for decades our country has been looted, pillaged, raped and plundered by nations near and far, both friend and foe alike. And basically it's payback time. Mm-hmm. These are tariffs. I mean, some of the countries are facing, very, very high tariffs indeed. I mean, very, very high tariffs indeed. 49% on some nations. We got hit with 10%. That's the lowest of the low. Do you think, first of all, that Americans, the American economy, American workers, American consumers, first of all, before we come back to Britain, will benefit from what Donald Trump did? Because he had various manufacturing workers from some of those key swing states, industrial states, and they were really, really pleased with what was being announced. Do you think this will actually benefit those people long run?
I think you'll be able to use the numbers to persuade them that they are, but the reality is they're going to be paying more. America is not economically inwardly focused. It hasn't been since, 1930s. It relies on global trade. And therefore, either Americans are going to have to do away with a lot of the consumer goods that they enjoy at cheap prices coming from the online Chinese sites or other places, and go to more expensive domestically produced goods. But again, US manufacturing is going to have to ramp up to be able to fill all that gap, and that takes time. That takes
because there's that argument, isn't it? Buy British if you're in Britain, buy American, support your local industry. Don't complain about jobs being lost if you're busy buying something cheap on Amazon from China.
Yeah, but nothing is purely one particular country. Apple is an American company, but the majority of the components are coming from Taiwan, from China, in your iPhones and your computers and
even
America.
I think I found amazing. I mean, unless you are an expert on the automotive industry, when you already know this, that even American brand cars made in America, so this is an American brand made in America, even they will have had goods which have gone in and out of Mexico and or Canada for 3 or 4, 10 times even, various different components. So that's, I must point out, it's 10% tariffs on the UK and again on most of the world on these US on exports to the US, but it's 25% on steel and aluminium or aluminum. I think we should just say no. This doesn't apply because we sell you aluminum.
We sell you aluminium, not aluminum.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to put this point to Seb Gawker a little bit later, advisor to the president. But and also on the car industry. Now, we have 800,000 jobs in the car industry here in the UK. A lot of those are sort of luxury goods that do have big exports to. I think 70% of our cars are exported to America. So that is and those are luxury cars, the Jags, the Bentleys, the Rolls Royces, and things.
And US taxpayers are going to get hit. Again, take defence as an example. The F-35 jet that everyone goes on about, 10% of that's manufactured in the UK. So there's going to be a 10% tariff put on it and coming to the States. And then components are coming from elsewhere.
So it's not that simple. I mean, and one of the reasons why I was worried and most worried about this is because when he put up this board, and it was sort of like a Eurovision, America, I mean, Australia's in Eurovision, so why not America? And it was sort of, Norvège, nul point. In fact, Norway had the standard tariffs, but 20%. But it's, sorry, 10%, same as us. But But it was, some of these numbers were, I mean, economists were going, these are plucked from thin air. And it turns out these are back of a fag packet ideas. We were told it's based on the economic tariff that is charged by those countries, plus other barriers to trade. And, you know, the EU did that to us. Load of paperwork, a load of stuff that makes it really hard. Particular standards on certain things. So, you know, OK, we don't let in chlorinated chicken. Well, there you are. That's a barrier to trade. That sort of thing. But actually, those numbers still don't add up either. What it appears to have been is that it's based on the balance of trade. So the reason we got a 10% tariff, not a 20% tariff like the EU, isn't because Keir Starmer's an amazing negotiator and charming, and we've got, you know, Trump has an invitation from the King to come and stay later this year. It's not because of that at all. Because we've got the same rate as loads of other countries that are very protectionist. It's because we don't have a trade surplus with America, because we don't sell enough to them. We're basically in a balance of trade.
I think you're...
So it's actually a failure of ours that we've got the 10% tariff, weirdly.
Yeah, but the whole thing's extremely complex, and I think you hit the nail on the head at the beginning when you said Donald Trump's thrown a hand grenade into the global economics, and
he likes to be the disruptor.
He does, but what he needs to understand is, if the American people are going to win out of this, he needs to understand the second, third, and fourth order implications. And whenever you get a set of tariffs put up, and we had a chat about this beforehand, the one that made me smile was the tariff on the herd and McDonnell Islands. Because of course you know where they are.
Oh, of course. Yeah, we did the Chagos. So just before we get genuine, and he held us. People who weren't watching you, he held up this board, but there were actually a number of other boards. There's a whole list of all the. It's pretty much every country.
Yes.
Tell us about these islands, because there is a 10% tariff on these.
Oh, there's 10% tariff on these islands, and you know they are between Antarctica and Grande Terre. Of course, everyone knows where Grande Terre is.
Help us.
Southern Indian Ocean, bordering the.
But they're basically an Australian territory.
And they're sitting there, and they have no people. So we're waiting for formal comment from the head of the penguin colony, which there is on the islands. Or one of the two active
volcanoes on the islands.
One of the two active volcanoes.
So this is the thing. There's an element of, like, I'm not sure you're paying attention. This is the worry, isn't it? Now, when we've got a whole load of people, got, you know, a raft of economists saying, you know, all the world's leading economists say this, and this. Well, yeah, and they said a lot about Brexit too. Yeah. I'm sorry, they said a lot about a lot of things that haven't turned out to be very accurate. They're also the people who got us into the mess where we got the economic crash in 2008, and also the mad policies of lockdown, which, you know, let's just print a load of money and see how it goes. So I'm not entirely sure I'm going to trust, quote, the experts, unquote, on this. But I also don't trust. I'm sorry, I'm not MAGA. I don't trust Donald Trump on this either. He thinks that VAT, which is a sales tax, is a tariff. It clearly is not. It's a tariff is something that's it's imposed on imports. It's imposed on all goods other than, you know, kids' shoes and food. So it's clearly not a tariff. So when you've got someone who has that little understanding and someone who thinks that we can put tariffs on a penguin colony, you've got a bit of a problem. People not paying attention to detail. Now, this is the thing. There are a lot of people in governments around the world, particularly the countries like China, where they damn well do pay attention to the detail. The big worry for me is, while I see a very good argument for imposing tariffs on China, both as a hostile nation, as a nation that repeatedly steals the technology and the intellectual property of America and European companies, which, you know, and then makes economic benefit from it. They use slave labour. They massively subsidise a lot of the industry. We're busy, you know, economically committing suicide with our net zero policies, while they're using coal-fired factories to make things. Entirely up to them, as far as I'm concerned, but nevertheless, we can't compete on that basis. So there is an argument that it's not a level playing field on that basis. I think there's an argument there. There's also an argument, is there not, for tariffs to protect key vital industries involving defence, involved in things like steel manufacturing. I would say agriculture as well. I mean, British farmers are still reeling from the Australian free trade deal, which massively hit them with imports from Australia. So I think that, you know, there is an argument for limited tariffs, which most countries do accept. There are very few 100% free trading nations. Limited tariffs to protect key products, you know, Scotch whisky, you know, or vital necessities like agriculture and like some steel production and things like that. That makes sense to me. Across the board, though, the worry here is an escalation of prices for consumers, because it's going to put prices up for American consumers. If we retaliated, it would put prices up for us. If the EU, as it looks like, retaliates, we will have no doubt see prices generally going up anyway. if there is an escalating global tariff war, that is bad for the world economy, and if it's bad for the world economy, it's bad for us, isn't it?
Oh, hugely bad. And this is where we wait with bated breath to see how other countries are going to react and how power blocks like the EU is going to react. If they start to impose tariffs back on the United States again, and we get into this global economic war that that is just going to destabilise the global economy even more, and we're all going to pay for it. I think what Donald Trump did last night has probably wiped out Rachel Reeves' headroom that she created, and a lot more. We are going to see job losses on it, and that's just on the 10% tariffs. If this trade war starts around the world, or even if it starts with one or two big countries like China, and China is going to respond hard, then the economic shock, we're going to feel it for months and months.
There are countries and periods where there have been trade tariffs, protectionist policies. America in the 19th century, people pointing out to me, Taiwan and Japan, they grew rapidly from economic devastation to being global leaders by protectionist policies in certain of their industries for a period of time. But in terms of developed economies, there is no developed economy with strongly protectionist policies which does well because of that. That said, I completely understand people's concerns about, great, we've got loads of cheap goods. Let's just flood our country in America, flood our country with cheap goods. That's great. We just buy everything online. Again, you want it cheap and you want to deliver for free by Amazon. Lovely, jubbly. Yeah, well, when you do that, you're allowing Amazon, a massive company that has all those benefits of power, where they basically push down the prices and take huge profits from people who are selling on there. But people just go, well, it's the cheapest, it's the easiest. So other companies in this country do go under. Those businesses don't start. Those businesses go under. They simply cannot compete. They cannot grow because you cannot compete with that scale. When you do that, that is almost, that's the equivalent of saying, let's just bring in loads of cheap goods. We can't compete with slave Uyghur labour. We can't compete with countries which are not basically tying their hands behind their back with mad net zero policies, pushing up the cost of energy for every industry. We have 4 times the energy price for industry here than America does. So we can't compete with America on that front. And that's the thing. I can really understand why people are very sympathetic to this and just say, look, at least Donald Trump is doing something for the American people and American industry. If it did bring factories, it did bring manufacturing, it did bring jobs back to America. The big question is, will it actually do that? With uncertainty, people are not going to go, I'm just going to go build a multi-million-pound car factory in Minnesota, because they don't know what the tariff policy is going to be, not in 4 years' time, but in 4 hours' time.
Well, and again, the economic shock will stop companies want to invest. Look at Nike. Nike, big headquarters in just outside Hilversum in Netherlands, but it's an American company with its main headquarters there. It does most of its manufacturing in Vietnam. Vietnam's been hit with huge tariffs. Its stock price went through the floor overnight after this because of its global footprint. Nike is not going to therefore have the money to invest in building those factories that it's exploiting the cheap labour in Vietnam in the United States, where it's going to be more expensive to build the factories, greater union control over the workforce. It's going to cost them more to get the output. Their goods are expensive anyway at the moment.
Well, a lot of that is profit.
Well,
because they make them so cheaply.
A lot of that is profit, but then they reinvest that profit back into expanding the country, creating more jobs, and profit isn't always bad.
I don't think a profit is bad. I'm just saying, whether you're running a sweatshop making the cheapest goods in fast fashion, or whether you're running a sweatshop to make the most expensive designer goods, the people working in Bangladesh and all these other countries, they're paid the same rate.
Exactly, and it will always take them years to set that up. So, the economic shocks now, and they're not going to see the benefit, if there is any benefit, for a long time.
The EU have been speaking. Ursula von der Leyen, the EU Commission President, she says this is a major blow to the world economy. If you had to make a prediction whether we do better or worse as a result of this overall in a couple of years down the line, what would you reckon?
Well, on the figures as at today, at this moment, and I'll time date it at 10:20, we're going to do a lot worse, because Donald Trump might change his mind tomorrow.
And that's the key thing, isn't it? The uncertainty. And yet, a lot of people would argue that Donald Trump's unpredictability is part of his power. The main thing is that in terms of retaliation, I don't think we should. We're not going to win a trade war with the United States. That's not an option. We are David, they are Goliath. Just try going for that free trade deal. But again, farmers will be very worried about that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I think this is like a lot of things. I think this is a much more nuanced conversation. People going, yeah, let's make America great again. And why don't we have a government that does exactly the same here? Yeah, that's the way to do it. Again, American power and British power, very different in those different scenarios. But equally, I don't think the world is coming to an end because of these tariffs. I think there may be I'm not sure, some method in the madness. There may be a bit of 4D chess going on. I don't know. There may be a plan. Who knows? Things often work out. Countries will react perhaps differently for how many is expected. But I want to know what you think. I want to know, would you like, Britain to do the same thing? This is about protecting American jobs, American manufacturing, American industry, even though prices will go up for American consumers, and certainly in the short term, maybe long term, and there could be an impact on the world economy. But do you think actually it's what you'd like the Prime Minister to do here? And do we, frankly, even if we're going to take an economic hit from this, there's no one saying we won't, we're going to take an economic hit. Do we really need anyone else's help to hurt our economy? Because we're pretty good at national self-harm anyway, with net zero policies, tax, over-regulation, bureaucracy, poor public services. I mean, we're managing it all on our own. We don't need Donald's help to do that, do we? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do get in touch, particularly if you're involved in any of the industries particularly likely to be hit. Do get in touch. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Talk.
Prime Minister also promised that he would not increase taxes on working people. But even the OBR says that the jobs tax will be passed on to workers. On average, families will be £3,500 poorer.
She wants the extra £26 billion in the NHS, Mr. Speaker, that was paid for by the national insurance rise. She wants that. She doesn't want to reverse the national insurance rises.
Mr. Speaker, I don't agree with making people poorer. I don't agree with pensioner poverty.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Philip Ingram is also here, former senior military intelligence officer. Let's get to some of your messages coming in about those US tariffs. There's lots more other subjects I want to talk about. Oh, by the way, including the fact that, according to the Resolution Foundation, lefty think tank, I mean, their boss of that think tank has gone into government. That's how lefty they are, full on Labour. But they're very good at their numbers. They say that as a result of Rachel Reeves' tax hikes, benefits, changes and things like that, the average household in this country will be left £400 worse off this year. And by the way, at the same time, we'll also discovered that our £10 on our energy bills last year has gone to support wood-burning firm Drax.
So are they saying that the Prime Minister and our Chancellor are liars? Because at the beginning of the week, they said we'd be £500 better off.
It's so difficult to keep up with who's lying the most this week, isn't it? I mean, of course we're going to be worse off. We're going to be a damn sight more worse off in autumn. Yeah. Rachel Reeves now has got a very good line to go, oh, well, it's the world economic situation. It's the US tariffs that mean I'm going to have to cut more spending. I mean, yeah, please cut more spending, but on the right things. And welfare, you know, and I'm going to have to raise some taxes. Seekers. Yeah, exactly. So she's got a good excuse, whereas actually she'd have to do that anyway because of the decisions she has already made. This is my point. We don't need Donald Trump's help to harm our economy. We're busy doing it ourselves. I want to know your reaction, though, to the fact that we've got 10% tariffs, the EU got 20%. We'll talk actually a little bit later about Northern Ireland, because they're, of course, in this weird supposedly best of both worlds situation, sometimes worst of both worlds. Yes. So they'll be on 10% tariffs, but the Republic of Ireland, as part of the EU export, will be on 20%. Yeah. So what does that mean for things going back and forward across that border? And yes, there is a border, because they're different countries. Why don't people get this? But let's get to some of your messages coming in, particularly thanks to Brexit, that difference. By the way, if it was the other way round, I mean, honestly, the BBC, The Guardian, everyone, they would be all over that going, look what happened because of Brexit. Well, we got a benefit. Basically, we're hit, but we're not hit as hard as we would have been. Adrian says, another Brexit bonus despite Keir Starmer's best endeavours. Laura says, how much has the UK already lost due to Brexit? On balance, the economic damage from Brexit far outweighs any relative advantage in Trump's tariff policy. The UK is still worse off compared to the EU. We did lose out economically short term because of the EU, the way the EU imposed their deal. You know, that was their choice, that's fine. I can live with that. I didn't vote for Brexit for economic benefit. I thought long term there would be, medium term there would be, short term, yeah, they wanted to punish us. Well, if they want to punish us, then I don't want to be in their club, is kind of my rule. But I think, I don't know, democratic accountability and national sovereignty counts a little bit more. But that's just me being old-fashioned. David says Trump is very cleverly showing his support for Brexit and his enthusiasm for keeping us away from the EU's clammy embrace. Yeah, David, except the fact that most other countries in the world got the same 10% tariff. Neil says, in reality, how many American cars do we see on British roads? Very, very few. But that's the thing. We don't buy American cars because of tariffs. We don't buy American cars because they're gas guzzling. They're way too big for our roads. You can't park them anywhere, and they're not very good. Yeah, but
the tariff isn't on selling US cars to the UK. It's UK manufactured cars to the United States. Yeah. And the United States takes most of our output from our car industry. Yeah. And therefore that's where it's going to affect jobs. Yeah,
exactly. Stacey says, to be honest, President Trump cares more about Britain than our own politicians do. I don't think Donald Trump cares about Britain at all. I think he wants to come and meet the stay in Windsor Castle. Yes. But I don't. I'm so sorry. I really don't. But get in touch. If you genuinely believe that, get in touch. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Let's go to Andrew, who's on the line in Hertfordshire. Hello, Andrew.
Good morning, Julie. You clearly had a much better journey to work this morning.
I did. I was in a right old mood at the beginning of the show yesterday. I genuinely packed like sardines with a train driver who was making announcements every few minutes. Genuinely, I thought she was going to have a nervous breakdown, full-on breakdown. She was so angry with everybody. Get that woman off the train. She's blocking the door. It was hilarious. But anyway, Andrew, tell us about what you think about these tariff trumps. Tariff trumps is a completely different thing.
Yeah, you've got a peach impediment this morning. Now, Philip will tell you that time is the greatest negotiating tactic, and it is. Trump's only got 4 years. The dollar is too strong. He wants to drive it down. The reality of the tariffs is it'll never affect us in real terms. If you are buying a high-end British car, you go to events where they're selling yachts, they're selling big boats, they're selling private jets. So when you're dropping 10, 15, 20, 50 million on one of those items, it's a discretionary spend to buy a Rolls Royce or a Bentley.
If they get an extra 20% or 10% cost on a car, it's neither here nor there for those people.
And remember, they welcome it, because Bezos, that foul thing, is actually hiring out the theme park that is Florence thingy for his wedding, and there's a stigma there. I can pay it. It doesn't affect me. Look how wealthy I am.
Yeah.
It won't affect us.
You're saying that, look, Americans who want to have a top-of-the-range luxury car from Britain because that's a kudos thing, they're going to still be able to pay for it. But here's the thing: there is the issue for the American consumers by and large, where the stuff they're buying from China, pretty much any tech item they're buying which has a chip in it from Taiwan, which is most of them, that's going to be more expensive. They're going to be paying higher prices across the board. So, I mean, President Trump went on and on about the price of eggs. Massive issue in the United States, huge issue. But okay, they're not importing their eggs; they're stateside. But an awful lot of things that Americans do buy are manufactured abroad. When people are poorer genuinely in America, that's not going to help the Americans. If you're paying more for your goods, your basic consumer goods, you don't get richer.
No, I agree with you, but remember, your average American, and like anybody in the world, the most important person is Trump. That's all he cares about, is himself, his image, and that he doesn't care about what happens to little people. He really doesn't. He just wants...
He makes a big play that is what he cares about, and a lot of people are supporting him because saying he is talking about bringing manufacturing jobs back to America. And he did do that in his first term, actually.
But in real terms, as Philip brilliantly articulated, do you know how long it takes to create a factory, to dig the hole? It takes years, and then train a workforce. Putting together a car, that is a highly specialised workforce that runs the machines for that. You can't do that. The lead time for that is 9 years.
That is very interesting. And again, with uncertainty, is someone going to invest like that? Really appreciate your call. Thank you very much indeed. He thinks that we're not going to be so impacted at all. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do get in touch. 0344 499 1000. Quick response from Philip.
Well, I was going to say, when it looks to the luxury goods, Andrew's completely right and all the rest of it. But when we say Rolls Royce, it's not just the cars. Aero engines. Aero engines for US Boeing-built aircraft and all the spare parts that go from them.
And when the aircraft are more expensive, then the tickets to fly are more expensive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And countries around the world, it costs them more to buy the aircraft.
Fantastic. Well, coming up in just a couple of moments, we are going to be talking to an expert in international trade to find out what she thinks. First up, though, time now to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning Oasis tickets at Wembley this summer, plus £10,000.
How do you fancy winning tickets to the hottest gig of the century? Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to bag yourself a pair of tickets to Oasis at Wembley this summer. Plus, we're giving away a whopping 10 grand and putting you up for the weekend in a London hotel. All you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 and you're in the draw. Alternatively, you can enter by post. Once again, all you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 or you can enter by post. Good luck.
18 plus UK excluding Northern Ireland. Enter by text for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on the 7th of April 2025. Or post your name and number to Oasis Competition, PO Box 3190. Colchester CO2 8GP to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of April 2025. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion.
This is indeed a new British Broadcasting Network promotion, and very good luck in that competition. 10:34 is the time. Take a quick break. More on tariffs and trade. Love to get more of your calls as well. Do get in touch. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Welcome back. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you for your company. Let's talk more about those Trump tariffs with my next guest. She's Alison Stewart-Allen. She's the Chief Executive of International Marketing Partners. She's also author of the book Working with Americans, How to Build Profitable Business Relationships. Well, Alison, we definitely need your advice, and so does Keir Starmer as well. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
First of all, I mean, your reaction to the announcements yesterday, and in terms of the tariffs across the world, tariffs for the EU at 20%, tariffs for us at 10%. We're basically the base rate, we're along with most of the rest of the world. China, Taiwan and others are getting much higher tariffs, far more damaging tariffs. What was your initial reaction to what Donald Trump had to say in the Rose Garden yesterday?
Well, first, if you compare where the UK is with 10%, against many other nations which have tariffs of, some in 60%, etc. I think the UK probably is happy that it
relieved,
was
at
only 10%,
least.
not higher. Yeah.
I mean, we certainly did, got better than the EU, but my understanding is that wasn't because of an invitation from the King. It's because we don't export very much to the US, whereas the EU does.
Well, I'm not sure if that's actually factually true. If you look at the various stats compiled by the Department for Business and Trade and a lot of the British Chambers of Commerce and other entities that track these, actually the US is a significant export market for UK products and services. And so I do think that's quite important as a marketplace for the British economy and a growing opportunity for British companies. I think what last night's announcement tells us is that the US understanding, or certainly this administration's understanding of the fact that we are in a global economy and that you cannot have Liberation Day in reality. The United States and manufacturers in the United States are a core part of an integrated global supply chain. If you think about automotive, you think about car parts, they come from all over the world, even though the owner of the US car brand is American. Their components are from around the globe. And that's the case across the board. So the US cannot suddenly withdraw from the global economy on an announcement that suddenly tariffs is going to fix all that. It will not fix that. It will never fix that.
No, indeed. I mean, I believe the US is a significant export market for us. It's the biggest single country that we export to. Obviously, smaller than the EU as a whole, as a bloc, but it's the biggest country. But the point is, for America, we don't have a massive trade surplus. They're not filling the heat of that. It was very clear when you look at the numbers, they're not based on actual monetary tariffs, and they don't even appear to be based on this idea, as Donald Trump suggested in his speech, that on the non-monetary tariffs, the other regulations, things, they seem to be based on where what the trade balance is between various countries. That's basically what he's based it on. But this is the thing. Lots of people are hailing this, on the MAGA side, the Trump side, that this is about Donald Trump helping Americans. This is about helping those consumers. And saying that basically we're going to have fair tariffs, he says, fair trade rather than free trade, but also crucially trying to get companies to come back onshore to America. If you want to go escape those tariffs, come and put your manufacturing, base your business headquarters here in America. How likely is that to happen?
Well, it's likely in 5 years' time. It's not likely now. Because if you're going to set up a factory manufacturing operation in the United States, you don't just come up with this overnight. You need a 4 to 5 year lead time to have the money available to be able to build a factory. Factories aren't cheap, and they take a lot of planning, and they need to be part of the business strategy of the UK company. You don't just suddenly say, oh, gee, wow, tariffs, tomorrow we'll go hunting around and see if we can buy a factory. This is a very significant investment. You do have a shortcut in a way as a British company by having a contract manufacturer in the US. So there are factories that already exist that have capacity. Hopefully they are tools to be able to make your products there, and you hire them to manufacture your goods.
Yeah.
That is an option. But again, that costs quite a lot of money. And so if you haven't allocated the budget, if you like, to be able to do this and see it as an integral part of your long-term business and marketing strategy, you're not going to suddenly overnight, or even in a few months, or even in a year, be able to turn on that.
And that's the thing, isn't it? He's looking for sort of an instant reaction. And we did see in his first term some more onshoring after changes to the trading relationship with Mexico, but also a lot of that was to do with tax, isn't it? And this is the thing. Among the reasons why there may be trading surplus or deficits with various different countries between the US and other countries and us and other countries is actually a lot of it is down to what goes on internally rather in your own country rather than what's going on externally in terms of regulation, in terms of red tape, in terms of the cost of energy. We have 4 times the energy cost of America and things like that. But so these things need to be taken into account. Now, there's no doubt at all there's going to be damage to our economy and to other economies hit by these tariffs. There will be job losses. Cars, aluminium, steel still face 25% tariffs. I think they've already come into force. These 10% tariffs otherwise on all other goods across the board come into force, I think 5 a.m. UK time on Saturday. There is going to be damage. Ursula von der Leyen of the European Union has said this is a blow to the world economy. Even Keir Starmer speaking this morning has said there's clearly going to be damage. Is it any more or less than the damage that has already been done by the British government, not just this one, but the last few as well, in terms of net zero policies that have quite deliberately and knowingly pushed up our energy costs, in terms of higher taxes, in terms of regulation, in terms of failures to train people, in terms of to do these sort of jobs? Have we done more damage to ourselves than Donald Trump could ever do to us with tariffs?
I'm not sure how to answer that, really, because I'd watch the transatlantic trade flows more than anything. And yes, maybe the inputs in manufacturing have gone up in the form of higher energy costs, as you say. But ultimately, what makes you succeed in the U.S. is having a product or service that's fundamentally better or different than what's already there.
That people want to buy. It's that simple.
That people want to buy, precisely. And, I have to say, I am one of the biggest, if not the biggest fan of the manufacturing output from this country. It's remarkable. The UK is incredibly innovative. The creative industries, if you look at TV, film, music, dance, the arts, this country is remarkable globally. And so are the luxury goods, and so are the innovations.
Those are our strengths.
Correct. And actually, doing your homework about the American market and seeing what is it that we already do that's better or different than what's in the States.
Yeah.
In some ways, that insulates you around your prices, and it insulates you around the tariffs.
Yeah.
Because you have an edge. You've got a point of difference. You have uniqueness that you have to protect in the U.S. market.
You're not competing with on the same playing field there. Look, as somebody you've written this book, Working with Americans: How to Build Profitable Business Relationships. Okay, we're always told Donald Trump's not a politician. I mean, I think second term in office, I'm pretty sure he's a politician, but he's a businessman, and he thinks of these things like a businessman and the art of the deal and all of that. If you were Keir Starmer, if you were advising Keir Starmer right now, what would you advise him to do in terms of how to deal with Donald Trump on this issue?
I think, again, not being a political expert, but a business expert, I think I would instead turn the focus on what could the UK be doing to support and encourage and help British companies to be even more successful in the U.S. So does that mean giving more money to the Department for Business and Trade and offering training courses and hand-holding on business plans to make sure that those business plans for the U.S. are watertight? Absolutely. So in terms of Keir's negotiation with Trump, I mean, I'm not in the room, so I can't say too much about that. But certainly as someone that's lived here for several decades in London, in the UK, I think more support for British companies would make them even more confident and bullish and ready to scale in an economy that is massive. And even with a 10% tariff, it's navigable. You just need to be smart about it, and you have to do your homework.
Yeah, indeed. It is such a huge market. Again, that's why people want to sell there. I was wondering, though, whether actually a bit less hand-holding, a bit less setting people free in terms of regulation and taxes and not putting, for instance, national insurance tax on jobs might actually help people more. Alison, really interesting to talk to you. Alison Stewart-Allen, she's CEO of International Marketing Partners. Interesting to talk to American living here about how to deal with this. But we tend to see these, Philip Ingram, don't it? It's like sort of almost these zero-sum games. I think like Donald Trump, like, oh, that's bad. How do we handle that particular issue? Whereas you can kind of just sort of go, OK, so the 10% tariff hits us. Let's work around that and do something else to grow. We can't do anything about that. We may be able to get a free trade deal with the US, but we don't have the same power as the US has to just start a trade war and win it. That's not going to happen. So we need to kind of think creatively.
Well, exactly. Our annual budget is what, $2.5 trillion. US is over $300 trillion.
Yeah.
EU is $200 trillion. But yeah, interesting point made by AJ on X to me whilst that conversation was going on, and he said, could this be Donald Trump trying to force different countries to come into some form of trade agreement quickly and put aside the bureaucracy.
4D chess thing.
Yeah, the bureaucracy that usually takes years to get trade agreements to go. You've now got an incentive to do it quickly, so do it quickly.
Yeah, and cutting through, like the EU takes 7 years to even sort of just get to paragraph 4 of these sort of things. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do get in touch, 0244 499 1000. I'm also going to be talking about extraordinary situation that one of the masterminds believed to be behind the Al Qaeda attack, 7/7 attack in London, is to be set free to walk the UK streets, despite fears that he is still at a risk to the country. He said, I'm a terrorist. He said he wants to kill Christians and Jews and others. I mean, I don't know why we're not taking him seriously. Plus, breaking news this morning from the Met's counter-terrorism command that 2 men have been arrested on suspicion of terrorism offences as part of a proactive investigation. A 39-year-old man and a 35-year-old man have both been arrested in London on suspicion of being members of prescribed organisation, preparation for acts of terrorism, one of the men, and being involved in a funding arrangement for the purposes of terrorism. It relates to Hezbollah, of course, which is prescribed under counter-terrorism legislation. We'll keep you up to date on any details on that. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
I think the ID card is something that we need to have that discussion about. I am utterly opposed to the digital ID card process that we had before. Now we take the biometrics of people anyway for passports and so on. I don't have a great deal of a problem with that because that links that document to that individual. But that's as far as I would go.
And of course, it's worth remembering that the government actually did sneak out a digital ID card, didn't it, in the form of the COVID passport?
Across the UK UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Philip Ingram's still with me as well. Going to talk right now about a Talk exclusive story involving thousands of European women living here in the UK but are choosing, when they get pregnant, to return to their home countries to give birth. Well, that is their choice. I wonder if actually in a lot of countries the healthcare is rather better, you're rather safer. Might make a lot of sense. But an investigation by Talk has found that nearly 4,000 women of non-British nationalities but living here, they've got status, settled status to live in this country. They had their babies abroad in the past 5 years and they've billed the NHS for the cost. That's the key bit here. More than £3.1 million of NHS money, supposedly from a fund to pay for Brits abroad. If you get caught abroad and you need health treatment, you've got your proof of your British identity, and then the EU hospitals will look after you, but then they'll bill the NHS, so our taxes ended up paying for it, which seems reasonable, and we do it for those countries' residents as well. But this is people who are residents women in Poland, well, they're from Poland, going back to Poland and then getting us to pay for their baby to be born in Poland. What on earth is that about? Let's talk about this with Jamie Jenkins. He's former head of health analysis at the Office for National Statistics. Very good morning to you, Jamie.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. What do you make of this? Because, I mean, I'm intrigued by the reasons why women are choosing to go home in the first place. If their settled status here means they probably lived here for quite a long time, hopefully working here and paying tax here, we can but hope. Why are women returning home to have their babies?
Yeah, well, I think part of this might be just in terms of getting maybe dual nationality for the child, for example. So obviously if they're Polish born parents, they might want to go back to Poland and have Polish on the kind of birth certificate and get the baby born there. But ultimately, Julia, I think you've highlighted perhaps a systematic flaw here, that if people choose to live in the UK, if they want to use healthcare abroad, and this S2 form that they have to fill in to do that, it does allow us to have treatment abroad, but we've got perfectly adequate maternity services in the UK. So if they want to go to Poland and have their children, well, let them pay for it in Poland themselves, not bill the UK taxpayer.
Well, that's the thing, because I looked at the numbers and it works out as £803 cost per woman. I'm wondering, would it be more expensive if they were treated here in the UK? That's what I was wondering. Are we saving money by them going home to do that? But the key thing here is actually, this system is set up for Brits to get necessary urgent health care abroad, which we then pay for, because you're our citizen, and it's just a reciprocal arrangement. It wasn't set up for people to just go pick and choose where they had their baby.
Well, no, and that's the part of the problem here, is that basically they're opting out of NHS services to have the treatment, but then charging back to the NHS for that treatment. And the fact that we're talking pregnant women here, Julia, this is not kind of some emergency thing that's happened, because you can't fly over a certain period when you actually are pregnant. So you must have made a pre-planned to do this in terms of getting the pregnancy.
And have somewhere to stay in the country where you supposedly don't live.
Indeed, and I'm probably not talking huge amounts of money, but it just goes to add to the fact that all these small amounts of money, when they all get added up, it starts adding up to a lot. And I do know as well, Julia, that we still have issues in the UK where women come to our country.
Well, I was just going to ask you about that. We've got a huge issue, and again, we're often told by the great, the good, oh no, it's on a tiny scale, but actually most hospitals simply don't ask. I mean, you go to a hospital in London, half of the people don't speak English as a first language. I mentioned this a few weeks ago. I was in a hospital for some testing or something, and there was virtually no one else in the corridor I was waiting. There must have been about 30, 40 people who were speaking English or English with an English accent, any likely English accent or British accent. And so a lot of people, they don't ask for your passport at reception. They have no idea whether someone's from abroad or not. But we know that a lot of women coming from poorer countries. We know also Nigeria has been a big, women, especially having multiple births, come here and basically get free NHS treatment, having not paid a penny in.
No, and I know of people working in the NHS that says this system is being abused, where people are coming to this country having children. Now, they're supposed to bill people when they do that, Julia, but I know, just looking at some recent reports, that this is into the hundreds of millions when you add up all of the different care, not just maternity services, that basically the NHS doesn't have all the details of everybody. They come in, they treat them, and then you don't claw that money back. And And that is a systematic failure. For example, if you go to the US, Julia, you're probably not going to get your treatment unless you can prove that you can pay for it in the first place.
Yeah.
And that is the difference between some countries and our country.
Yeah, I have to say, I don't think we should let anyone through passport control this country who hasn't got some sort of insurance, travel insurance that includes health insurance. I really don't. I wouldn't dream of going abroad without travel insurance. And if you can afford to travel to this country, you should be able to afford that. And if you can't afford it, and it's often in about sort of, worst, 80 quid a year or something like that for a single person, that's covering everything. I've got to be honest with you, if you haven't got that money, I'm not sure you're much used to this country. I'm not sure you're going to be a big spender.
Well, you can't even control the borders, Julia, with small boats coming over there. So how are we going to get to a system where we're going to make sure everybody's got travel insurance? The country is in dire straits, Julia. And the story that Talk are highlighting this morning, I think going back to that, just to finish off, I suppose, is that the NHS needs to look at everything in terms of waste. It's a small amount of money when you take the grand scheme of things, but you can't have this systematic problem where if women want to have their children abroad, choose to live in this country, use our services, but don't bill us back.
Well, indeed. And again, we all have that old phrase, count the pennies and the pounds will take care of themselves. Count the millions and the billions will take care of themselves. Jamie Jenkins, always so good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Philip Ingram, your response?
I'm going to swear at you here.
Oh, please don't. I'll get in trouble.
No, it's not. It's not that.
My producer Ted's face just
exactly. I know. There's a solution to this. You're not going to like it. It's national identity cards.
Oh, phew! Thank God, it could have gone so. You're as bad as Tony Blair.
Well, I'm not a Tony Blair fan in any way, shape, or form.
No passport. If you're a foreigner, I'm sorry.
But if you had something that had your national health credits on it, so if you're a citizen here, you're allowed it. If you've come in as a refugee, you're not. If you come in in some other way.
When we give people emergency health treatment, at the end of the day, women will just claim that's what they're doing with pregnancies when they come here. Well, it's an emergency.
But it gives you an accounting method, and that's the thing. And therefore, if someone's going for their post maternity care whenever they come back into this country, having given birth overseas, the midwife turns around and says, "Oh, where did you give birth? Oh, you gave birth overseas, did you? Why did you choose that? Oh, you did that. Okay, and records that against your national identity card number."
Yeah, I still don't want to be required to have an ID on me that is required and have papers, please society. I don't want to live in Germany. In Germany, you're not allowed to leave the home with ID on you.
We have to accept that these sorts of costs are going to be there.
We don't have to accept. There are easy ways of checking.
How?
But really, again, can we all just stop pretending we can't tell? You can't tell who's from here and who's not. Come on, give me
exactly.
a break.
And there needs to be better checks. And this is where the country is wasting so much money by just not doing it.
Yeah, because again, I looked at this and I went, that's not so much. Could be worse. You think no? There are so many. There are a million examples of a few million quid being wasted. Yeah. They add up. It's why we're this, and it's that attitude in the public saying, "Oh, it's not very much.
It's not my money."
They'd care if it was their money. Wouldn't they? Anyway, love to hear your thoughts on all the stories we're talking about today, particularly on Trump tariffs. I'd love to hear your reaction. Did we get a Brexit dividend in the end? And why are people not talking about that? This is Talk. That is the home of common sense. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call.
how much, ladies and gentlemen, are fish and chips where you come from? And we'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish chips and peas, £7.50. It's the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips, in Leeds it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish chips, peas, I think one of us curry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning to you. Welcome back to the show. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 11 o'clock. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and this is Talk, the home of common sense. And whether you are listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, or on your connected device, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have your company. Great also to have the company of Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer, and man of great knowledge on many, many issues, as we have learned over the years. We're talking mostly today about these Donald Trump Liberation Day tariffs, this announcement in the Rose Garden yesterday. Global markets have seen sharp falls today. The US president vowed to stop the US being, in his words, looted, pillaged, raped and brutalised. He unveiled what he called reciprocal tariffs, even though they're far higher in most cases than the tariffs actually being placed by other countries. But it's across the board, every single country in the world. The lowest, the base rate is 10%. He called it a declaration of economic independence. Well, thanks to Brexit, we are not hit by the EU 20% tariff. We face just the base rate of a 10% tariff. But that will mean job losses. It is that simple. We will see thousands of job losses in this country as a result of that, particularly in manufacturing of cars, and indeed in the food and drink industry as well. Going to be talking more about that. Particularly want to hear your thoughts on, do you support Donald Trump in doing that? Is he doing the right thing by his own country, even though, of course, it's American consumers who will pay those tariffs? It's a tax on his own consumers. Or is this about bringing manufacturing, bringing goods and services, manufacturing back into the America, and actually that long-term will be a big benefit to Americans? Should we be doing the same here? What do you make of that Brexit benefit, that Brexit dividend of not getting the EU-style tariffs? And what do you think that we should do in response? I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK and your message to 87222. You can get in touch with us on X as well, at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1, standard network rate message. Also going to be talking about Glasgow, which has become the asylum capital of Britain. More asylum seekers have been sent to Glasgow by their Home Office than anywhere else. Locals say the scale of new arrivals is wrecking social cohesion. Yeah, I bet it is. Plus Prince Harry's demand for taxpayer-funded security when he visits the UK with his family or alone will be heard at the Court of Appeal next week. He's basically bringing a case against his own father because it's His Majesty's government he's bringing it against. Meanwhile, Meghan has launched, I know you're all very excited, aren't you? Meghan has launched her As Ever lifestyle brand, and I, for one, have already stocked up on her jam, honey and herbal tea. I know you have too. Put tariffs on that, no one will be bothered. Anyway, this is Talk. Welcome to the Home of Common Sense. Philip Ingram chuckling away there. Desperate to buy those... although there won't be a tariff. She makes it in America, in a factory somewhere. She probably has no idea.
I've pre-ordered. My cupboards are full.
I mean, I just wanted the bath salt recipe. Lunatic. But anyway, there we are. Look, let's talk about this tariff. I want to go on to other topics because there's so much more I want to talk about today. But this is the biggest story. It's a big economic story. It's a big political story. First of all, is there method in the madness? Does Donald Trump have a big plan? Is this amazing game of 4D chess that we hear so much about? He's a businessman. He understands these things. This is about helping the people of America. This is about making America great again, wealthy again. Is there a plan?
No.
OK, moving on. How can you be sure about that?
A couple of things. I was talking to a senior US diplomat a few days ago, and he turned around and said that all the decision-making, everything goes through Donald Trump. He makes his mind up. He gets advice from those underneath. He doesn't always listen to it, but everything that comes out is his design, full stop.
Which is why very much, not only did other countries not know what the tariffs would likely to be on them, everyone was waiting with bated breath before that first big sign was held up with the numbers. And I don't know about you, I was squinting at the TV going, my eyesight's not so good. What What does it say for UK? What does it say for UK? But apparently no one in the White House knew either.
Yeah, and the second thing, if your attention to detail, and there's going to be second, third and fourth order implications of this, and if you can't get your first detail right, then you won't have thought through the rest. And if you're putting 10% tariffs on the herd of McDonnell Islands, where there isn't a single person, and we still haven't had...
It's a tiny island between Australia and Antarctica.
Well, it's not even close to Australia, but it's just north of Antarctica. But we haven't even had a formal comment from the head of the penguin colony, because there are only penguins that are inhabited there.
There are two active volcanoes. Yeah, there are two active volcanoes and no human beings, but he's slapped tariffs on this island.
10% tariff on it.
Yeah, it's all a bit bizarre. Although it was interesting, wasn't it, that Russia wasn't mentioned. Ukraine has tariffs, by the way. Russia wasn't mentioned, but then there are economic sanctions on Russia, and there's pretty much zero trade between Russia and America anyway. I think it was only about $1 billion anyway. Europe was much harder hit by those sanctions in the first place. But this is the thing. A lot of people are saying that this is what he's doing. He's trying to bring jobs back to America. We spoke to a trade expert a little bit earlier, business expert, pointing out, companies don't go, oh, tariffs have gone up. I know what, I'm going to relocate my factory in Wisconsin now because otherwise I was in Mexico or I was in China or whatever, and I'm going to do that. These things take years. There's years of planning. They cost millions of pounds. They're not done on a whim, and they need to be based on certainty. And if you don't know what the tariffs are going to be in, say, 4 years or 4 months or 4 days or even 4 hours, you're not going to be making those decisions. And that was one of the problem we had post-Brexit, where we're told about there's this economic hit from Brexit. A big part of that economic hit was that businesses were in this sort of no man's land for 3-4 years, not knowing whether or not we were going to Brexit, because we had people like, Keir Starmer, who was Shadow Brexit Secretary, trying to stop it from happening. And when there's uncertainty, and we have that even if it's just 6 months before a general election, when there's uncertainty, we don't know what the policies will be, we don't know what the tax rates will be, businesses sit on their hands and they don't make any decisions. And when they sit on their hands, that's bad for us.
Well, and it's not just sitting on their hands. When the global stock markets are crashing, the companies are losing their ability to borrow money and draw on funds to invest.
By the way, your pension fund just went down, everybody. You've got money in your pension, it's on the stock market, you've just lost money.
Yeah, and therefore companies aren't going to invest in building new factories, and then universities are not going to train more people to provide the technical staff for those factories.
We only train media studies people now. We don't do that. Don't be silly.
Well, your golf course management.
Is there golf course management?
Donald Trump likes that.
Well, there's a future in that. Do that, kids. Is there an argument that if you're in the EU now and you've basically got, because of Brexit, and we did hear some companies did decide to move to the EU, there are actually an awful lot of companies that chose to come to Britain specifically because we had left. So that swings and roundabouts, people. Everything is played up. Depending on people's political point of view, everything's played up or played down politically. But would there be an argument if this were to be the future, and it was set in stone for a bit, that actually some companies that have based themselves in the EU might choose to base themselves in Britain instead?
Oh, very much so. And if they've got any sense, what they'll do, because they can play by both sets of rules, depending whether it's internal or external markets, is base themselves in Northern Ireland.
Yes.
Because Northern Ireland is only subject to the UK tariffs when it comes to selling stuff to the United States, but it can play the movement
EU,
across the border, the EU rules.
They're supposed to have the only reason I would ever defend what happened in Northern Ireland was it was supposed to kind of have the best of both worlds. I didn't like it.
It's got the worst of both worlds, but this gives an opportunity to turn it into the best of both worlds.
As it's turned out. Well, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Where are you on this? And a lot of people are saying, no, we need a leader like Donald Trump who would do this for us. There will be an economic cost to American consumers. I mean, we did have a call earlier, someone pointing out, look, the people who are buying are top of the range, Rolls Royces and Bentleys and things. These are not people who are going to be bothered by the price going up here or there. I mean, I think a lot of those people still will be bothered, but the point is that those tariffs are across the board in America for everything coming into the country, minimum 10% extra tariff. And those tariffs, he says they're reciprocal, Donald Trump, they're not. We had an average of 1.3% tariff on the US, and now we're being hit with 10%. In no way is that equal and fair, level playing field. But we hit back, he's just going to put them up. And we're just going, if we hit back, if Keir Starmer today announces, well, we're going to have 10% tariffs on US goods, all that will do is put prices up for us here in the UK.
But also it'll hit jobs. And here's a classic one where you're selling a Boeing aircraft somewhere in the world. People have got a choice of a Pratt & Whitney engine or a Boeing or a Rolls-Royce engine. The Rolls-Royce engine is going to come with a 10% tariff out of Rugby. The Pratt & Whitney engine's made in the United States, no tariff whatsoever. You can buy the aircraft much cheaper. So you're going to do that. You can buy the spares much cheaper to maintain it.
Yeah.
And the United States sells more Boeing aircraft with US engines in it. That means Rolls-Royce Rugby, their aero engines, is going to start losing jobs because it's not getting the orders.
Yeah. One of my concerns, I raised it with the former head of the British Army, Lord Dannett. We were speaking to him about the Chagos Island deal yesterday, and I asked him whether he was concerned about the risk of an economic war, a trade war, turning into something more like a real war, a military war, because we use economic power to wield diplomatic power, to wield military power as well. I mean, you can't be a strong economy. You can't be a strong military without a strong economy. We know one of the reasons for these sanctions on Russia is over trying to stranglehold the economy there, so in terms of their ability to fight in Ukraine and to punish them. This could kind of be the other way around. Is there a worry that a lot of the bad feeling being engendered by these tariffs, the breakdown of trading relations, the breakdown of diplomatic relations, that could lead in a few years' time, it could spiral downwards into a breakdown of good relations between countries which until a few months ago considered themselves friends and allies, not foes. Are you worried that we could have I know people are saying, well, we need a breakdown of the world economic order. Well, question mark over that, but do we need a breakdown of the world diplomatic order? I would say absolutely not.
That's one of the second or third order implications, and the threat isn't a few years away. The threat is much quicker than
with
that.
With Ukraine and Russia, with Taiwan and China.
I think it's China in particular. The huge tariffs that are on there, because as soon as a country feels that it's going to be impacted economically by what's going on, if it feels that it can fight back either through a trade war, then they'll try that. But if that doesn't work, you have to remember the military is not something that does wars in isolation. It is diplomacy by other means, and therefore starting a fighting war is diplomacy. And if China thought that they could create greater economic impact on the United States by invading Taiwan and taking Taiwan by force, which Xi Jinping has already said he's willing to do, he's preparing for it now, then he might decide that instead of having a tariff war, I'm just going to do this, and the repercussions...
This is perfectly within the realms of probability, isn't it?
100%, and that would deflect from domestic issues.
And a lot of people point out that Donald Trump, throws his grenade in when the smoke clears, and he's a Mr. Disruptor, and that's power, and speeding up those trade negotiations. And I can see the argument for that, but there is also a huge risk to that.
Yes, massive risk with it. And this is where I don't think, again, going back to, I said tongue-in-cheek, the whole McDonnell Islands, if you're missing out that level of detail at the surface, at what you're announcing publicly, then
and
you won't
also, if you're
the
claiming that VAT in the UK is a tariff when it's a sales tax, just shows such a lack of understanding. An awful lot of the numbers that he gives in his speeches are completely made up about, American costs of funding the war in Ukraine. I mean, he trebles that routinely. I mean, he uses a different number all the time. It's fascinating how often you see these numbers, whether he's echoing numbers he's seen on social media or social media is echoing what he says. But, again, you can have your own opinions, but you don't get to choose your own facts. I mean, there are different ways that facts can be interpreted. I get that. But there are some things that are just facts. How much has been spent? Was it a loan or was it real money? And a lot of the stuff he said yesterday was just completely plucked from thin air. It really, really was. Let's also talk about something that's not been plucked from thin air, and that is those savings that Doge has made, the Department of Government Efficiency, headed by Elon Musk, not a formally member of the government, sits in cabinet. I love all the Democrats.
Quango is not.
They get in a complete state about that. Even though Jill Biden, was just the first lady, and she chaired cabinet sometimes. Of course, Joe Biden was never in a fit state to do it. The reports that he was preparing to step back from his role as a senior White House aide. Donald Trump believes to have said this to some in his inner circle. There hasn't been a falling out. Now, Elon Musk has denied this and said this is fake news, but he says that a lot, and not necessarily do we know whether that is actually true or not. But there is a feeling that he is another big disruptor. That works very well for him. I love some of the things he's done, but he also is rubbing a lot of people up the wrong way in the departments, and particularly the President's Chief of Staff. And also, of course, he is seeing a massive hit to his Tesla company in terms of sales falling, value of the company, even the reports of him returning to basically being Tesla full-time, and SpaceX, and suddenly saw shares go up. Do you think Trump is better keeping him in the White House, or are they both better off him out?
It's difficult. He's unelected. You know,
yes, but so is the entire cabinet.
Yes, but he's a maverick in what he's doing. He's virtually unaccountable. His business interests are being hit very hard by his lack of engagement in them, and he is creating a lot of enemies. Now, whether those enemies are just for him or they're translating across into Trump's support amongst the MAGA population, I don't quite know. But if he's doing that, Donald Trump will want to move him on. I was surprised that he gave him so much overt power, and maybe it's all because he didn't wear a suit in the Oval Office when he had a sun on his head. You know, we know what Donald Trump's like with suits in the Oval Office.
Feels terribly strongly about that, does he not? I just don't bring your kids to work. It's just, I think it's very, very, very bizarre. I like a lot of the stuff he's doing, but I can understand he would rub a lot of people up the wrong way, and also these blanket cuts. I like the idea of actually saying, let's assume it's cut. And we'll decide what to bring back in, but you know, big concerns for a lot of people that actually, you know, you can cut that aid project and that aid project, but don't cut the stuff that's actually saving lives. So I understand that concern there.
Yeah, but if you look at everything that the Americans are doing with the tariffs, with dealing with global conflict, with what Doge is doing, any one of those projects would be a major project for a well-established and experienced government. Trump doesn't have a well-established and experienced government.
but actually that's part of why they can do it.
Yeah.
That is part of why they can do it. You know, I mean, I'd love to have some more of that here. And we ain't going to get it. We're not going to get it. But there we are. I just want to get to another topic before we go to a break, and we're going to get to your calls. Love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000, as you know, on all the topics we talk about, but particularly on US tariffs as well. But breaking news we had today that 2 men have been arrested on suspicion of terrorism offences. This is part of an investigation by the Met's counter-terrorism command. 39-year-old man was arrested, and a 35-year-old man, both at addresses in London, on suspicion of being members of a prescribed organisation, Hezbollah in particular. And they're focused on their activity overseas as well as activity here. They said there's no imminent threat to the public, but one of the men being charged with preparation for acts of terrorism and involved in funding of terrorism. Now, you know, I mean, I'd like more of these arrests, please. I'd like more arrests of people who are bigging up Hamas on our streets openly in front of police officers. But there we are. Although we're going to do a little bit later a story about Met police cuts, so we're not quite sure we're going to do that with fewer officers. But this comes after an extraordinary report. This is in the Sun today, the front page of the Sun. That a former Abu Hamza accomplice, who is believed to have helped him set up a terror camp, a man who is believed to have been closely associated with the 7/7 attacks back in 2005. Remember that 7/7 bombing attack on the Tube and the and buses in central London? God, I remember that so vividly. I just remember desperately trying to reach my husband, who I knew was around those areas at that time for work, and just, I mean, for hours and hours, the phone lines were down. You remember, you couldn't get through to anybody. It left 52 people dead and more than 800 injured, many absolutely life-changing, horrific injuries on those tubes and buses that were blown up. But this man is going to be freed on our streets. I mean, this is just extraordinary. His name is Aswat. He has spent the last 2 years in a UK psychiatric hospital. He's going to return to Batley in West Yorkshire. And absolutely extraordinarily, this man... he apparently has a schizoaffective disorder. He's been held by in this UK psychiatric hospital. He has told a psychiatrist, "I am a terrorist." He said this to a British psychiatrist while he was imprisoned in the US in 2022. He said, "I am a terrorist," and he said he wanted to kill Jews, Christians and Muslim enemies. He trained at a camp in Afghanistan. I mean, he's just been so closely linked. Deported to the UK and held under a US arrest warrant. But he's going to be allowed out of this country, out of detention, and he's going to be able to walk freely on our streets, even though he says he is a risk and the police and the authorities accept he is still a risk. This is madness, is it not?
It is madness. Now, what we don't know is, as soon as he's released from his hospital care, because he's in hospital, and therefore he doesn't come under the Terrorism Offenders Act, which forces convicted terrorists in this country to spend 2/3 of their time before they're assessed by a rather large parole board. It's the 70-man parole board. He seems to fall through the cracks in this, but you can guarantee that, as exemplified by the two arrests that have just happened, counter-terror police and the security services will be watching and will have done their homework behind closed doors. There are over 900 people, 900 active investigations into 3,000 people today that they're carrying out.
So we're going to spend an absolute fortune having round-the-clock surveillance of this man, who we know is a threat, we know is a risk. It's insane.
If he stays in the streets, if they find anything that's in the background, they may arrest him as soon as he's released from hospital. They can't say they're going to do that now. They can't do that now. But if they find anything where there's a threat and they can pin it on him, I suspect that he will be, as he walks out of hospital, rearrested under the Terrorism Act and potentially then taken away to be prosecuted. I hope that's what happens.
Utterly, utterly, utterly mad. I mean, he's been all around the world. I mean, he was deported to the UK and held under US arrest warrant, and now we're stuck with him. This is one of my things about Shamima Begum. I think she's our problem. British, she keep going, she reneged her passport. I think she's our problem, shouldn't be a serious problem. But I'd only have her back in this country if she was behind bars for the rest of her life.
The trouble is...
End of. And she wouldn't be. She'd probably 2 months, if that, which is why we can't have her back. But we've just got to start putting the British people first. It's just that simple.
The book deal, the television miniseries and all the rest would make her a multi-millionaire. That's the perversion that there is in this country.
We're absolutely mad, we really are. Your thoughts on that? Gratefully received, because genuinely insane. It's really, really terrifying. We're just fighting a losing battle on this front. 11:23 is the time. Do get in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call, particularly about US tariffs. Anything else? Love to hear your thoughts. We'll get to your calls up next. This is Talk, Home of Common Sense.
We've spotted at the bottom the United Kingdom. He's going to charge us 10% tariffs and we charge America 10% tariffs. So it's completely reciprocal, no discount for the special relationship.
Yeah, but that's the way it should be.
I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm just doing my job, relaying the facts.
No, I got it. But wouldn't it be great if all of the countries in the world, including the European Union, did that, right? 10%, fair enough. Make it 0. That would be great. Yeah. So I think this is a good moment for the UK.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:26 is the time. Let's get to your phone calls, coming in thick and fast about Donald Trump and those tariffs. Phil is on the line. He's in Hertfordshire. Hello, Phil. How are you?
Good morning, Julia and Philip, on this lovely sunny day.
It is a lovely sunny day. Are you feeling buoyant after Liberation Day yesterday for the United States?
I feel so liberated, it's unbelievable. I'm flying my Union Jack. Right, the Don. It's interesting. I mean, you mentioned 4D chess, Julie, didn't you? You could well be doing this, you know, because obviously imposing tariffs is going to put some more financial burden on countries. They're going to pass it down to the people, us. Yep. Now, we're getting hammered, aren't we, with net zero?
Yep.
It's going to annoy people. It really is going to annoy people. Now, I wonder whether if people were ditching the woke route, that Mr. Trump would have been a little bit more favourable.
You think that our internal policies would... A lot of people are saying, oh, it's all because of it's because of our freedom of speech and things like that.
It's possible. I feel
we've got the same rate as pretty much every other country in the world who don't have a trade.
It might be, but he might have given us 5%.
No, because the base rate was 10.
The base rate was 10. Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, we got the lowest. We got the lowest available. But that's my point. Was it down to the King invitation to Windsor Castle? Was it down to Keir Starmer's innate charm? I mean, I don't think it was down to anything. And we just don't have a trade surplus with them. So
no, we don't.
They weren't bothered.
We haven't got the clout, have we? That's the thing. I definitely don't think it was down to Starmer. That's for sure. Maybe it would have been down to the invitation from Charles. But with the rest of Europe, as I say, 4D chess, put more pressure on the country. They'll put more pressure on the people. The people get fed up with the governments and then they'll turn against them.
I mean, I'd like to think that he could think that far ahead. But as Philip has been pointing out, the fact that there were tariffs on an island that contains nothing but penguins and active volcanoes. I think we can say, but Russia, where they don't do much trade because of course there's economic sanctions, was left out. I'm just not entirely sure they're aware of that much detail.
No, well, I mean, maybe it's wishful thinking on my part, but I mean that's how I see it.
Would you like a British government led by Keir Starmer or whoever else? Would you like a British government that acted in the same way? Because he's talking about protecting American jobs. He had representatives of workers in key states, where key swing states that he won that helped win him the White House. Something very, very loud there. The idea is that he's protecting jobs there. Would you like something like that here?
Well, I would, yeah. I mean, let's be honest here. Who wouldn't want their own country to protect their own people's jobs? But unfortunately, again, when we look at the green, manic thought pattern of the Miliband, he wants to shut down all the the gas rigs and everything and put cement. Well, what's that going to do? That's going to lose jobs.
Yeah. Oh, well, already. Oh no. I mean, most of our economic difficulties are down to the fact that we have high energy prices, and that is as a direct result of net zero policies. Don't blame Ed Miliband for it. He's just the man with the flag at the front. Keir Starmer, the whole of the Labour government behind this, virtually all the Tories, Lib Dems, everyone else. This has been part and parcel of British politics for over 10 years now. They're all signed up to it.
They are all signed up to it. And the question I would like to, why? What is it actually all about?
Because it means they're nice people.
Oh, lovely. Yeah. Maybe
no, really, is that because they don't want to be shouted at and told they're a bad person and a climate denier or whatever by people and called, I mean, that's what you get. I get that, but, I don't care because I'm not denying there's a climate. But there we are. Phil, I really appreciate your call. Thank you. I like that he's trying to come up with some method in the madness. I don't know if there is. Let's go to Steve in Blackpool. Hi, Steve.
Hi, good morning, Julia.
Good morning. Everyone's very chirpy today.
I'm always chirpy. You can't get two emotions in the same day. They don't pay me enough.
What do you want to say?
Donald Trump, I admire that he's trying to help his own country. What I'd like to know is, now I'm not an American expert and don't pretend to be, he's only got one term left, hasn't he?
Yep.
He can't do another one, can he?
No. I know a lot of people talking about that. He can't.
So what's stopping in 4 years' time that the Democrats don't get in again and it all gets reversed again? So...
Well, I mean, again, if J.D. Vance went, then he may carry on. But again, I mean, I don't think Republicans generally aren't in favour of tariffs. They're normally likely to be free traders, which is interesting. But that's the thing about the trade-offs and the benefits that there could be from getting companies to come and build their factory. No, you're going to face tariffs. Come and build your companies here, provide the jobs here. You avoid the tariffs. That's all well and good, but it takes a lot of time, and the benefits will come a long time down the road. But the costs right now will be hitting consumers right now. And cost of living was a big factor a big factor for his vote in November.
It's a massive factor, and I think there's a bit of spitefulness here with Trump because of the way the election went, and the UK was like, oh, the lady's going to win. I can't even remember her name. She was that.
It's the best. Do you know what? I'm so jealous that you've managed to forget her. Well done, you.
I can't remember her name.
Kamala Harris. I mean, I don't know. She had a different pronunciation every week, but anyway.
Exactly.
She's gone.
And I've got to be honest, Keir Starmer, he really hasn't got the cojones to do this job. He doesn't.
Do you not think a lot of people, even on the Tory side, and from actually, he's not played Trump too badly. He's kind of realised, the King's invitation, a bit of flattery, a bit of, bonhomie, keeping in the private phone calls. He's got on with him a lot better than I thought he would.
Okay, I'll give you that, but I don't think. When it comes to greasing palms, he's not the best. He's not the best
No.
at it, is our Starmer. He's all about the net zero and I'll do this and I'll do that, because I mean, if he was a Conservative Prime Minister, everybody'd be shipping out to Rwanda now. Because the Conservatives thought of it, he said, I ain't doing that.
Yeah.
Because they thought of it. It's tit for tat.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Better.
Yeah, there is that. That's still only been a few hundred people, which I don't think would have been enough in Rwanda. I want a wide-scale policy. You come on a dinghy, you never set foot in this country, or it's 24 hours max. Steve, thank you for that. Love to hear your thoughts. Do get in touch. We're going to talk to Baroness Kate Hoey, who's an independent peer, former Labour MP, big Brexiteer. Find out we've got that Brexit dividend, something to be pleased with, or at least relieved about the result of those tariffs. We're also going to be talking about Prince Harry back in court next week over asking for the government to pay, the taxpayer to pay security for him when he and his family are in the country. Plus, Meghan has launched her As Ever brand. I know, I'm as thrilled as you are. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Philip Ingram still with me. Let's talk to Baroness Kate Hoey right now. She's an independent peer. She's also a former Labour MP and one of the most prominent campaigners for Brexit way back when. Feels like a lifetime ago. But Baroness Hoey, lovely to have you here. And amazingly, we actually got a benefit from Brexit, a clear benefit that no one could deny, or they could just pretend to not look at and not notice if they work at the BBC or they're a Mona. Same thing. We've got 10% tariffs from Donald Trump yesterday, whereas the European Union got 20%, twice the right place. Is this a clear benefit of Brexit?
Well, I think everyone should be very pleased this morning, particularly businesses, that we're not still in the European Union. And it was lovely, I have to say, watching Trump last night go through the list and then come to the European Union. And I mean, his remarks about the European Union are I think, probably even more, radical and worse than the kind of things that we said during the Brexit campaign.
Well, he says the EU was formed to damage America,
Yes. Well, I mean, the reality is, and I know that the figures he puts up are slightly skewed, but the reality is the European Union has been putting on very high tariffs to American goods. And, even the UK, I mean, I don't think we can complain too much about 10% when we tend to put 10% on a lot of those things that are going to America. And
our average tariff is 1.3% on things going to America.
Yeah, but the one, a very, very good one and very simple one is oranges, where we've got a 10% tariff on oranges coming from the United States. And that was a new European Union one to protect their Spanish oranges and so on. So we should be getting rid of that.
Yeah. Do we have orange groves? I mean, it's a lovely day right now, but I'm not thinking orange groves is a big agricultural deal for us.
Well, no, but I just think that that behind the scenes there is a lot of discussion still going on, and I think we will find in the next short while that actually there will be some kind of arrangement between the United Kingdom and...
You think it will change? One of the things
I think, to be fair, Keir Starmer has played it pretty carefully and given all the things they said about Trump. I mean, I'm amazed that Trump has been so magnanimous, really.
Yeah. I thought David Lammy was a disastrous appointment for 20,000 different reasons, but particularly for his comments about Donald Trump, and they seem to have rowed back on all that. One of the things I thought was fascinating yesterday was Number 10 was issuing statements to journalists immediately after the Trump announcement in the Rose Garden, saying, well, obviously, no tariffs are good. It's like, well, that's funny. You love tariffs when you're in the EU, and a complete lack of understanding. Some people have, we believe in free trade, like the EU. No, the EU is a customs union. There is free trade within the EU. Everyone else gets big tariffs. That's the whole sodding point of the thing.
Exactly. And I would hope that this whole debate now, in terms of the UK's reset, as they keep talking about with the European Union, that this will just cause some people to perhaps reflect on really what kind of reset we would be wanting to have that would be in our interest, because I can't see anything that would be in our interest. But I am worried, Julia, about the fact that if the EU does actually now reciprocate, as they're quite likely to do, where does that leave part of the United Kingdom? My
Northern Ireland,
Northern Ireland, because we are still in the EU customs code. So we would end up with paying 20%, or if the EU replicate and go further, then I think the government's going to be put into a very interesting situation where the Prime Minister will have to decide, really, is he really going to continue to support this ridiculous European Union idea that they want to break up the United Kingdom by leaving Northern Ireland in it, or actually stand up to them. So hopefully we will see some movement on that.
I hate to tell you, I think we know the answer to that from Keir Starmer, but there we are. But this thing, it is very complicated. A lot of people, I think, are seeing it very simplistically. This is going to be helping America. They're going to be absolutely fine. They'll do so well. But actually, that's simply not the case. If we do actually have, if there is any benefit for America, it will take years. There's going to be a hit on consumers. And again, unlike our general election last July, the election for the presidency and the Congress in November in America, a lot of it was about cost of living. It wasn't just about woke and immigration. It was about cost of living, the pound in people's pockets. But here's the thing. You and I've spoken many times on this show. We're talking about the hits to the British economy. There will be some job losses, in particularly in the automobile industry, steel and the like, which face 25% tariffs, not just the 10% tariffs. But realistically, we don't need any help committing economic suicide, because we've got net zero and Rachel Reeves to do that for us.
Well, I mean, this is the problem. I mean, energy and the whole way that we're handling the net zero thing is just causing more and more problems. They're stacking up. And unless the Prime Minister finally decides that, his Secretary of State for Energy, the Green, Ed Miliband, is actually, not working now. It's not in our interest to continue this ridiculous drive to get this way ahead of any other country, when in the end the ordinary people are suffering from higher costs. And it's just, more and more people are really waking up to the fact, I think, that the whole net zero is based upon the idea that somehow we in the United Kingdom, by changing a few things that are causing huge problems for ordinary people's livelihoods and standards of living, that we're going to save the world from some kind of climate eruption. It really isn't something now that I think people are beginning to wake up to it.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm so pleased that they are. It's interesting. Sort of a lot of the Labour...
You've been pushing this for a very long time.
I have. A lot of Labour supporting trade unions are basically saying, look, this is about jobs fundamentally. And this is the thing. This is what it has come down to, and the pound in the pocket. Now, the interesting thing is Rachel Reeves come next autumn, and she's going to deliver her budget. She's already lost her fiscal headroom. The tariffs would have wiped that out, such that it existed in real life anyway. She's now got a great excuse for, we're going to have to go worse. They're just going to discover another £20 billion black hole. But households are already, according to the Resolution Foundation think tank, it's a left-wing think tank, their boss has just gone to work in government, stood as a Labour MP, is in government now. Even they are saying that households will be left £400 worse off this year as a result of her tax rises and the pressure on family finances from rising bills. And again, a lot of those, like energy bills and are as a result of government policy. We are getting poorer.
We are getting poorer, and it's not going to get any better because of the policies we've just been discussing on energy. But also, the idea that she could actually tell people and say it with straight face that you're all going to be £100 a year. She said, better off. Now,
Wasn't it 500? 500 a year?
Sorry, £500 a year.
I mean, just pluck a number. It was 17. Let's just pluck a number from thin air, because that's what she did.
I think they tried to roll back a bit and say, oh, no, it was so much per year. But it's people, you wonder sometimes who actually goes out and does their shopping and who does, who pays their bills. Some of the politicians. Yeah. I mean, I was a politician too. So, but, I just kind of feel that they get into this little kind of almost a sheltered area where they've no idea, or they don't seem to want to know just what's going on out in the real world.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, on 90 plus, honestly, I've got no issue with MPs being well paid. I know I'm issue with some of the expenses for second homes, although not for cockapoo pet rent, £900 that are being billed to the taxpayer. But again, understanding how people are genuinely having to tighten their belts and are really struggling right now. Can I ask you just one final story? I just found this absolutely extraordinary. Basically, people in Glasgow have basically said, we've had enough. We've got a problem. We need to deal with the issue of us becoming, they say, that basically the Britain's asylum capital. They're saying we can't take any more people. There's been a huge influx of asylum seekers to the UK, to Glasgow, Scotland's second city, of course. It's been the largest dispersal area for asylum seekers in the UK. Basically, the Home Office saying, well, where are we going to put these people? Right, you're all off to Glasgow. So almost 4,000 sent to Glasgow while their applications are being considered. Another 240 in emergency accommodation. Since February last year, 1,000 people have also come to the city from elsewhere in the UK to get basically saying they are homeless, who've been granted leave to remain in the UK. And basically, the local officials and local people are saying, we can't deal with this. It's affecting social cohesion. It's affecting people's safety on the streets. People are concerned about this. It's a huge cost to local authorities, an impact on housing, on hostels. This is untenable, isn't it?
Well, I think they're speaking up for what a lot of people across the country are saying. And, no one was asked whether in their area, whether they wanted to have suddenly, literally people being bussed in to come into their area and change the whole nature. No matter how well behaved they are, no matter how nice they are, it changes the whole community feel when you have a huge number of people who don't come from...
Of young men arriving, largely from countries who have a very different attitude to particularly women.
Yeah, and many of them come from countries, sadly, where women are treated as, very, very much second-class citizens, and it's the warning signs have been there, and I just think we have to have a policy which is very, very clear that if you come into the country illegally, unless there is a really, if you come in illegally, even if you have had problems in your past, then you're not going to be able to stay.
Yep, full stop.
And special arrangements for countries where there's been special problems like Ukraine, like Afghanistan, slightly different. But we've got to say no to this. And it's otherwise, I'm afraid we're going to see real problems in areas. We're seeing it in Southern Ireland a lot.
Oh, yeah. I mean, everyone's already seeing. We're seeing it across Europe. And again...
And they never send... Julia, they never send these people to the very, very... what you'd call expensive posh.
But that wasn't that the genius of people like Ron DeSantis in Florida, when they just sent a load of people who arrived in Florida, they just sent them up to Martha's Vineyard, and they, of course, these lefty right-on Democrats were all sort of up in arms and horrified and wanted to have them all shipped out. It's like, you're perfectly happy to have these people, you just don't want them near you. I've always said, you put these people, you buy up all the houses apart from Keir Starmer's house, lovely, nice, white stucco house, I'm sure, in Islington. You buy up all those houses, you put those people up, 3 to a room as like hostel style. I bet you anything Keir Starmer would change his tune. I think he really would.
Again, I think, Julia, the mood's changing on this. People are prepared to speak out now, and the fact that they used to all be called racists is not being, that.
I got called a racist yesterday on the way home from work. A woman wearing a cafe scarf, which I thought was a giveaway, pushing her baby in a pram, walked past me and said, "You're a racist." And I said, "Oh, hello, lovely to meet you too. Why would you think that?" She said, "Because everything you say." And I said, "Such as, could you give me one example?" And she said, "Everything you say." And I said to her, "Who am I racist against, out of interest?" She was, "Everybody." I mean, but you can't think of a single, everything I've said and everyone I hate in this country, apparently because of their colour, but you can't give me a single example. And of course, she just marched off, and she had a baby with her, so I'm not gonna be great. But I thought it was absolutely fascinating, just like that someone could have said that. The weird thing was, a few years ago, that would have upset me. Didn't upset me yesterday, because it's just like that word is just bandied around, and you just think it doesn't have any meaning now, which is terrible, because that word has horrible, horrible meanings. But it kind of doesn't hurt anymore, because we've all been called that even just for voting for Brexit.
Exactly. Everything. It's as I said, the mood's changing. People are speaking out now. They're not prepared to put up with it, and governments have to listen. And we see the council elections coming in May. Well, we'll see what happens there, and it might just be a big shock.
It's going to be very interesting. Yeah. OK. Thank you, Baroness Kate Hoey, independent peer, former Labour MP. Thank you so much. Very quick word from Philip Ingram, listening to all of that.
I don't think there should be any illegal asylum seekers put into any council area where there's one single homeless person or there's one single homeless veteran.
Absolutely. Nailed it. Exactly. Either not here or in an internment camp. We just have. There's no other way we can do this. And the human rights lawyers won't allow either. But again, take them into your home. If you care so much, take them into your home. I'm sure you've all got spare rooms. 11:48 is the time. I'm going to take a quick break. Up next, going to talk to our royal correspondent Rupert Bell about Prince Harry's latest few days in court coming next week, suing effectively his own dad's government. And, of course, Meghan launching her jam on her new lifestyle label. I know we're all excited. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
European Union, they're very tough, very, very tough traders. You know, you think of the European Union, very friendly. They rip us off. It's so sad to see. It's so pathetic. 39%, we're going to charge them 20%, so we're charging them essentially half. Vietnam, great negotiators, great people. They like me, I like them. The problem is they charge us 90%. We're going to charge them 46% tariff.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:51 is the time. Let's talk to Rupert Bell now. Talk's royal correspondent to talk about the latest. There's always a latest, isn't there? With Harry and Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. A very, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia. Welcome to Aintree. Sorry, I've got helicopters flying all over me at the moment.
Of course you do.
Because people, you know...
it's head of the Grand National this weekend. Yeah, I love it. People who don't know, and how do you not know this, that, of course, Rupert is a top racing correspondent. And frankly, you prefer that as your day job to the royal side of things, do you not?
Well, it's a little distraction, but Meghan it just keeps on giving
with
her raspberry jam,
and her bath bombs and like. Well, look, let's talk. There's two stories related to them. Prince Harry back in court next week. This is the Court of Appeal, and this is all over his demand for the taxpayer to provide the police and security when he visits the UK. He hasn't brought. I mean, Meghan, I think they came back for funerals and things, but otherwise, the kids, they've not been back. He claims he cannot make sure that his wife and family are secure. Of course, he lives in a country where everyone has a gun. He seems to be fine about that. But what is the latest stage of this court case?
Well, there's going to be an appeal next week. And what's, I think, frustrating to a lot of people, thinking, well, of course he will have a degree of security when he comes here. No one's going to be saying that wherever he goes and stays at a Royal Windsor or Buckingham Palace, security's there anyway. There's knee-deep in security. Yeah. So I think it seems to me to be a convenient excuse at times to say, I don't want to come back to England, because I'm pretty sure Meghan's not busting a gut to get on a plane back to this country, unless she can tell me otherwise. So I feel it's a bit of an excuse. But yes, he's got to be mindful of security, but they're mindful of all members of the royal family.
But isn't the argument about being able to... He can bring his own security, and it's a huge cost, and one of his arguments about why they need to make money is because they need to have security, and they do need security, of course they do. Even just for being famous, they need security, but they also need security because he fought in Afghanistan, and because he is the son of the king. Whether he's part of the royal line, in working royals, it doesn't matter. He's the son of the king. He is a target, and my view is just for those two reasons. I mean, one of which he was worked out half of our country in Afghanistan, and because of his birth, which he has no control over, I think we should provide him with security. This is one thing, I mean, I actually support him on, but there are times when he wants his security to have weapons. They can only do that if they are authorised by the British police, and that needs the Home Office to agree to it. I think his ask is completely reasonable on this for once in my life.
Well, I think the thing is, I think he would always be afforded a degree of security. He's just got to let people know what he's doing, because I'm absolutely sure he is not going to be left with no security should he come here. But as long as he briefs people where he's coming, what he's doing, then I think it's probably likely to happen. What the defence from the Home Office is as he's no longer a working member of Royal, he comes into a different category. And that's where the grey area is about. But I'm pretty sure that he is never going to be left without security, because it wouldn't be sensible.
Well, thing is, the Home Office might think he comes into a different category. I don't think that's how ISIS or Al-Qaeda or Hezbollah or any other terrorists see it. I just don't think that's how they see it. He's the son of the king. He's a target. He fought in Afghanistan. He talked about the killings in Afghanistan. I think he needs security. But there we are. Whatever the cost it ends up being. But again, he doesn't come back very often anyway, does he? Let's talk about Meghan, Meghan, by the way, Rupert wants to know if you do want to come back to England or not. Seriously, at any time, give us a call. We'll put you on air. I'm not Oprah Winfrey, but we're happy to have you if you want. Now, she, of course, had this absurd documentary series, this Netflix series, her lifestyle brand, With love, Meghan. I managed to last 5 minutes before I lost the will to live. We made watch all episodes. Don't even know how many there were, but you almost lost your mind. Your frustration talking about it was a joy to behold. My favourite interview of the last year. But she's now launched her lifestyle range as ever, and there are 8 products, including 11-pound jars of ham, marked as sold out on the website within half an hour of going live. Who's buying this nonsense?
Well, how many do they actually sell before they put the sold out sign?
If you've got 5, you might sell them out.
Yeah. And the thing is, what we've been told is that these jam jars was raspberry spread. It's, she's got elevated uses for them.
What does that mean?
Well, basically what she says, you can fill them with love tokens and leave them around the house once you've used them. You can put pencils in them. Who knew what you do with spare
with an old jam jar? We've all got cupboards of old jam jars. I love the fact. I mean, her wildflower honey with honeycomb is priced at $28 for the love of God. I mean, herbal tea mixes for $12. I mean, it is extraordinary. I don't know if there's the bath bomb that she spent it. I only got to the beginning of the bath bomb bit in the Netflix series. But then, look, this is all about making money. This is all about rebranding herself. But, I mean, she does have a brand. There are people who love her and literally, Team Sussex, the Sussex squad, what they're called, they literally wait on everything she does. But is she going to make money out of this, given the lifestyle that they lead? Does she have enough?
Well, the thing is, we're now seeing lots of stuff of her on Instagram. We've seen recently of her cooking with her mother in their house in Montecito. She says she didn't want the camera crew filming the programme because she's got 80 production staff. Well, jeepers creepers. No, that is an awful lot of people chopping up the vegetables for her in someone else's house.
Hey, but you need a lot of people to arrange those bits of fruit in a rainbow pattern. Come on.
And open those packets of pretzels. The most important thing, though, is what we are seeing is the fact that her house, and what I think is probably happening to some extent, is we're getting, she wants people to believe in her lifestyle. She lives in this gilded lifestyle. Is it something that she wants people to aspire to her lifestyle? But she lives like nobody else. 99% of the population of this world do not live like her.
And that's the thing. And again, it is also at a time when people are really struggling here and in America with inflation, with problems. Read the room, lady. This is not what people are looking at. We'll see how well it does. It'll be fascinating. Well, I'm assuming we'll get to see her accounts at some point. Rupert Bell, always good to talk to you. You get back to the horses where you're happy. Our royal correspondent there at Aiden Street. Philip Ingram, will you be buying some $28 wildflower honey with honeycomb?
Definitely not. I've got better honey sources.
That sounded so suspicious.
Slightly less, but not much less. But
I'm too tight for this stuff.
But she's I take my hat off her. I admire her enormously. Her marketing strategy is superb. She's just had you and Rupert giving her 15 minutes of advertising.
I always
for nothing.
feel ashamed. I always have to go home and sort of whip myself for things that I should not encourage this. And we really should never talk about them ever again.
So
I know that's what we should do, but I can't stop myself.
All our listeners and all watching will be suddenly go, I need to look at that and go onto our website or stats.
They're not going to buy it. They're going to look at it and laugh at it. Put it on Instagram or X and laugh at it, aren't they? My producer's now cackling away about me saying that, but there we are. Coming up next, we're going to take a quick break and then we'll get the headlines. And then we're going to be hearing from Sebastian Gorka, a senior advisor to Donald Trump, about those tariffs and why we got 10%, what we can do to get those tariffs off, and how they are going to benefit not just the US economy, but maybe the world. That's what I think he thinks. This is Talk, the other home of common sense.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Welcome back to the show. Very much appreciate you joining me with you all the way until 1 o'clock. Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer, is also still joining me. We'll get his thoughts on what all my guests have to say. And whether you are listening on DAB Plus Radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, great to have your company. Great to get your calls in as well. They are, of course, most expected and welcomed on any topic, but in particular on that announcement of US trade tariffs. Thanks to Brexit, Britain escaped the worst of the Trump tariff blitz yesterday, as the UK is hit with 10% tariffs from Saturday morning, while the EU faces 20%. I wonder what your reaction is to that. Should we retaliate? We certainly had the statement, as we'd expected. We've been doing a media round this morning, but a statement in the Commons from the Business and Trade Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, saying that, the government is disappointed, although by all accounts they were just rather relieved last night that we faced 10%. The base rate of tariffs are given out to pretty much the rest of the world, not the 20% the EU faced, or 34% that China and others face. But Donald Trump's Liberation Day tariffs were announced by the president in the Rose Garden of the White House. He vowed to stop the US being pillaged, raped, looted and brutalised, and unveiled what he called reciprocal tariffs on all countries, calling it a declaration of economic independence. Also, we're going to be talking about people in Glasgow hitting back at the asylum system after the city became effectively the asylum capital of Britain, with the largest number of asylum seekers, some 4,000 sent to the city. Locals saying the scale of new arrivals is wrecking social cohesion. Plus, the Met Police is set to cut 1,700 officers and staff as it faces a £260 million hole in its budget for the coming year. I'm not quite sure how we're going to have any crackdowns on the various terrorist threats, the other threats we faced, shoplifters, burglary, goodness knows what. If we've got fewer police officers again, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Do get in touch. The number once again, 0344 499 1000. Philip, just to come to you briefly before we go to our next guest in this hour, Sebastian Gorka, senior White House advisor to Donald Trump in his first term and now. In terms of just particularly the Brexit dividend, do you think the fact that we were not in the EU and that Donald Trump's got an affinity to Britain, his mother's British and loving the royal family, do you think that helped us, or was it just a simple matter of the fact we don't trade as much with America as the EU does, and therefore we got away lightly?
I think it's a bit of both, and it's balancing it off against, Donald Trump's team will see Keir Starmer as the Democrats, with just a different leader. So, he's tired. Keir Starmer's tired with being Joe Biden or Kamala Harris in Trump's team's eyes, because that's a political background. So I think we got away luckily.
Few, I think, is the phrase. Well, let's talk about that with Sebastian Gorka. He's Deputy Assistant to President Trump and a Senior Director for Counterterrorism in the White House, and joins us once again. A very, very good afternoon to you, Sebastian.
Greetings. Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. It always starts nicely with us, doesn't it? It always starts nicely. Now, Donald Trump made a very big play about these tariffs and how basically this was a declaration of economic independence, Liberation Day, leaving aside what's going to happen to the world economy or what the impact on the UK economy, just in terms of the impact on the American economy. I was a bit confused. He seemed to be claiming that there was going to be billions coming in from the tariffs, which would help the American economy and could lead to tax cuts for Americans, although of course they're a tax on American consumers. At the same time as saying this could lead to sort of trade deals and going to zero tariffs with other countries. Now, it can't do both at the same time, can it?
Well, it can, because there are 200 countries in the world, Julia. And some of them will react properly and sensibly and in the common sense fashion, and others may not. So with those who understand why it's happening, and with those who want to see the collective pie grow, they will react properly and they will remove those obscene tariffs. We have one country, for example, Japan, that has a 700% tariff on the import of US rice into that nation. When they realize that their goods will be affected, then those nations will take action to level the playing field. But of course, this is a temporary measure to instill some kind of common sense into those nations that are using punitive rates, tariffs, and taxes against U.S. goods. It's a leveling of the playing field. We're not going to be the world's piggy bank anymore. We're not going to see U.S. manufacturers penalized because their goods are the best.
Okay, I mean, I can see a perfectly fair argument, reasonable argument to say, you know, free trade, fine, but fair trade better, and there's an element of protectionism in virtually every country. I mean, pretty much every country, I think apart from Singapore, maybe, I don't even know, has some level of protection tariffs just to, you know, you protect key aspects of your agriculture or some of your industrial production, steel production and things like that. However, there's no doubt at all America has had lower tariffs against some countries than they've had against them. But is that the reason why people aren't buying some US goods? Or is it the case, say, for instance, with car manufacturing, you know, we don't buy American cars because, with all due respect, a lot of them aren't very well made. They're often gas guzzling. Your gas prices are much lower than ours, and they're rather too big for our streets. You can't park them anywhere. So it's got very little to do with tariffs. It's more to do with people sometimes don't want to buy some of those US goods, and you've got an awful lot of better off, a large number of well-off consumers who can afford to buy our goods.
Well, I would believe that if it weren't the case that I drive a Ford Mustang, which is easy to park, and I love my Ford Mustang. And on top of that, the fact is, why are they punished then? Why are certain nations punished? If the product isn't good, you wouldn't have to tariff against it. It's because it is so flipping good that you have these outrageous things being done to US products. So I think your logic has collapsed at a certain point.
So is the plan, you say these are temporary measures. He didn't say that yesterday, but you're saying these are temporary measures, and clearly then the plan is, it's basically a wake-up call for governments around the world. Lose your tariffs, bring them down. Let's get back to some more a better playing field in terms of trading. And at that point, it's better trade for America. But here's the thing. If that were the case, would that actually lead to more onshoring of manufacturing to the United States? Because that's another thing Donald Trump's promising. And you had, of course, those representatives of workers from some of those key swing states where, you know, a lot of manufacturing jobs have gone. They've been shipped to Mexico, shipped to China, whether it's to technology or just cheaper labour, and basically saying, look, I want you, if you want to get rid of these tariffs, you have to come and base your factory, base your plant here in the US, where you can provide those jobs to American people. Now, there are a lot of people in Britain who go, yeah, we love a bit of that here. We've offshored an awful lot as well. But if other countries basically relege on their tariffs and they say, right, OK, we'll cut those tariffs, then you won't see that happening, will you?
Well, it's already happened. I don't know if you've been tracking the unbelievable decisions made by massive companies, including Microsoft and others. Even before the inauguration, we had commitments made by CEOs standing next to President Trump in Trump Tower, saying they're going to bring, if you add it all up, it is now in excess of multiple trillions of dollars worth of investment and jobs to the UK, to the US, because they realized what President Trump was going to do and they wanted to get out in front of it. So literally trillions of dollars have already been committed by CEOs to the United States to bring those jobs back. So it's not a hypothetical. It's actually happening right now because people realize this is a businessman and he means what he says.
Okay, but they bring those jobs back to the States, but if the tariffs change, then there won't be the economic benefit of that and they'll ship back out again.
No, but it's not just about economic. Look, this is really crucial to understand. We don't look at America as an economic unit. This is the absolute travesty of modern trade and economics. So they look at human beings as things that create wealth. We look at our country as a nation, as people, as a community. So we look at that as not just, oh, will it affect tariffs on the long term? We want human beings to be treated as human beings and for those jobs to come back. If you want to really understand what happened yesterday, I strongly recommend to all of your viewers and listeners, do one thing. You'll have a Damascene moment if you read Hillbilly Elegy. From a man who back then...
J.D. Vance, the vice president's book about his life.
Yeah, J.D. Vance, who wasn't a real Trump supporter way back when, wrote this book about how his working class family was destroyed by not just the Democrats, not just the left, but the establishment conservative Republicans saying, oh, who cares where things are made? We can offshore them to cheap labor in China and Mexico, and how a whole generation and more were betrayed and lives were destroyed, how his mother ended up a drug addict as well. If you want to understand why tens of millions of working class Americans voted for my boss, a billionaire from Manhattan, then you need to read that book and understand.
That makes a lot of sense.
This is about human beings, Julia.
There is an awful lot linking that argument to the arguments for Brexit made by people like myself and many others back in 2016. And again, all the years after that, we were still fighting for it to happen. And I know, we were talking to you around that time as well. And the argument being that, this idea that, we're all economically better off. Well, we're not. Some people get better off from free movement of people, but not everybody does. People whose jobs are lost to people working cheaply from Romania and Poland aren't better off. They're not reaping the benefits, but also there is an issue of community cohesion, about people's quality of life that isn't just about pounds, shilling and pence. Let's talk about some could say the Brexit dividend that the UK has received. We've not been treated as the EU bloc. Now, there are various countries in the EU that have massive trade surpluses with the US, like Germany. We don't have a big surplus. We're kind of pretty even on trade. We've been hit with the base rate of 10% tariffs. EU has got 20%. Is that a Brexit dividend?
I think that's a fair way to look at it geopolitically. I think President Trump is very, very happy that the UK is now a sovereign nation. People miss this when we discuss or analyze what America First means and make America great again. An underlying theme in everything we do is sovereignty. This is the rebirth, the revivification of nations acting as nations and not being beholden to globalist projects, to attempts to create, one world of peace and harmony, which underneath is really an exercise in the accretion of power for those who aren't actually elected to public office. So absolutely, we want nations to be sovereign, and I think the deal that the UK received yesterday is a inference, is a recognition of that.
I mean, it was the base rate. We didn't get zero tariffs. It wasn't actually equivalent to the tariffs we put on US goods. So we didn't do badly, but we didn't do any better than anyone else. The government has said today they are disappointed. They said there will be an economic impact. We're talking about thousands of jobs being lost here in the UK. How much of this, the position that Britain is in today in terms of those tariffs, how much is down to just the balance of trade? How much is down to Keir Starmer and his relationship with Donald Trump over the last 6 months, last year? How much is down to an invitation from the King to come on as another state visit? How much is down to the special relationship? And how much is down to, you're just another country along with every other, and you get the 10% base rate?
Well, it's definitely not the latter. I'm a little bit bemused, or rather amused, by the British press's reaction to yesterday's news that everyone else in the classroom gets a D grade, the Brits get a B, and you're complaining that you only got a B grade while everybody else gets a D.
We're among 60 countries who got the D grade.
Why can't you celebrate the fact that it's only 10% and that you can negotiate your way out of it if you take certain measures? So, and let's be clear, I've said this time and again on your show, Julia. President Trump has a very special place in his heart for the UK, for historic reasons, familial reasons. The idea that this is somehow you're just another country, it's utterly fallacious.
You say we can negotiate our way out of it. OK, give us some advice. What can we pass on to Keir Starmer? What should he do?
I am a US government employee who works in the White House. I am not going to give advice to the duly elected premier of another country. I think the logic for all nations is clear. Don't penalize our products, then you won't have punitive tariffs. It's really that easy. It's nothing more complicated. The mathematics are very simple.
There's no doubt at all that the UK government has kept their powder dry. There doesn't seem to be a knee-jerk reaction. I think largely most people think that's a good idea. We are a David to your Goliath. We ain't going to win a tariff war with a much, much, much bigger trading partner. The EU, as a bloc, see things differently. There's a lot of talk from Ursula von der Leyen, the European Union Commission President, and other European leaders about retaliatory tariffs. We know we're seeing them from China and other countries as well. What will happen if the EU raises tariffs to the same amount on US goods or higher? What will happen next?
Yes, a lot of talk, I think, is the best descriptor for the most of the things that come out of Brussels. I think you'd agree with me. Look, I'm not going to predict what will happen with regards to the EU, because the EU has to decide one very simple question. Do they want to have, as you said at the beginning, this is about free trade that is fair. Does Brussels want to have trade relations with the United States, the largest economy in the world, that are based on fair relations? I would say if you're a decent group of people, you would say yes to that. And there is a road to that if you do things that are not punitive to U.S. goods. Again, it's very simple. Do they want to have good relations with the greatest power in the world? I would think that's a good idea.
Can I ask you about some of the tariffs? Lots of people were questioning why Russia wasn't mentioned on tariffs, but Ukraine is 10% tariffs. But although it seemed to me rather obvious, there are sanctions, so there aren't any tariffs at the moment. But for some reason, there was a 10% tariff imposed on the Heard and McDonald Islands. Why was there a 10% tariff imposed on basically a rocky outcrop with 2 active volcanoes, not a single human being, and a lot of penguins?
Well, because it's a piece of territory that can be used to transport goods through. I mean, the level of asinine analysis by the mainstream legacy media is really quite stunning.
You put 10% tariffs on a tiny outcrop of islands near Antarctica.
Let me finish.
Come on.
The idea that, there's only a few people or some penguins.
No people.
So what? So what?
Well, then they're not.
Why are there so many ships that are registered to nations that don't have shipping industries? Because they are of utility to play a silly game in world economics and trade. Why are there so many? This is just, if they have a punitive tariff, a message will be sent to don't exploit that relationship. With regards to Russia, we're in the midst of the most important negotiations of the modern age to stop what my boss, the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, calls the meat grinder of the Ukrainian war. And he's absolutely right to say that. So I think let's concentrate on stopping the deaths of thousands of young men every week with regards to that.
Well, we could do that. We talked about this before. If your boss, your ultimate boss, Donald Trump, called his big mate Vladimir Putin and told him to stop killing Ukrainians, then the war would be over.
Yeah, I'm not going to...
Just saying, it's a simple way to stop the killing.
Julia, you got me irritated last time. I'm not going to take the bait.
All right, then. Well, sorry for my facts. Let's come back one final point.
What are the facts, then? What are the facts?
No, you said you didn't want to go there. No, we did it last time.
His mate? What are the facts for that?
We did it last time. Let's talk about...
What are the facts?
We haven't got much time, and I know you've got other interviews to get to.
No, but you can't get away with that.
Okay, sorry.
You say that's facts.
The facts that if Donald Trump's got such a good relationship with Vladimir Putin, why doesn't he tell him to stop invading a foreign nation state, to stop bombing and killing the Ukrainian people, and then the Ukrainian people wouldn't be killing Russians, and the whole meat grinder would stop tomorrow?
How is he his mate?
He keeps talking about how they're friends.
How is he his great mate?
I don't think they are. He claims he is.
Have you heard of the Wagner Group?
Yes.
Do you know what
I know.
The
we
Wagner
talked
Group
about
is?
this last week. Yeah.
Yeah. So President Trump killed more than 300 Russian soldiers the first time around who were working for Vladimir Putin. No American president has done that, not since the October Revolution of 1917. I'm not sure that qualifies.
You're saying they're not friends.
Mate.
Okay. Right, let me just come back on to now. Look, you've explained the reasoning, the rationale behind these US tariffs and what you want other countries to do in response and what the benefit can be for the United States. And you'd argue, I suppose, the benefit for those countries if they did drop those tariffs. However, there is that concern, and I would probably share your should we say, dubious questioning of, all the world's economists say one thing, does that mean it's true? They've been wrong about an awful lot of other things over the years. But when there is so much concern that these could lead to a sort of a world economic, trade war, a collapse of, global trade, warnings of a worldwide recession, the reality is we don't really know what the reaction is going to be. Donald Trump has effectively thrown a grenade into the world economic order. We're not going to know how things turn out and who's benefited and who hasn't until the smoke clears. Are you sure that we are not going to be heading into basically a world economic downturn led by your boss, Donald Trump?
Oh, I'm absolutely convinced that's not going to happen. Look, with Brexit, And with President Trump's first election into office and now his historic victory of 77 million Americans voting for him, the age of experts is dead. I mean, can we just put a stake through the heart of this idea that experts should be respected? Are these the experts who said that the vaccine would mean you'd never catch COVID? Are these the experts that said putting a mask on a 5-year-old child is good for them? The age of experts is gone. Salt the earth over it. Rip it up and just bury it. We don't believe in the quote-unquote unanimity of experts. We believe in the people to make decisions that are good for them and to choose the leaders who will represent them. So I couldn't give a flying toss what the experts say.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Sebastian Gorka, Deputy Assistant to President Trump and a Senior Director for Counterterrorism, senior figure, both advisor in the first Trump administration as well. Absolutely going for it there, Philip Ingram. I mean, he's been out defending his boss. He makes some very good arguments. They're very, very strong arguments. And again, interesting that point about the Heard Islands, which is a fair point. That could that be used on a technicality?
Well, it's interesting. Our listeners are doing some research on our behalf, and apparently in 2022, the islands exported $1.2 million worth of heavy equipment to the United States.
Interesting. So it has been used before. So that makes it.
So he's right.
So yeah, absolutely, very interesting. It's why we like our audience, get in touch all the time. He's basically saying, look, these are temporary.
Yeah.
You can negotiate your way out of it.
Yes.
That's basically the message.
And that fits. You get a free trade deal. But there's a few other things that are interesting. The whole thing. One, US instilling common sense. We're forcing our views. Is what Sebastian said. He talked about nation states. Does that therefore mean that Donald Trump sees the EU as a globalist project? It's getting away from the nation state, and that's why he's attacking the EU so much. But then if we get into the detail, put the Heard and McDonnell Islands to one side and get into something more serious. He called Taiwan a country. The US officially recognises a one China policy. It had Taiwan and China as separate.
Yeah.
And called Taiwan a country. That is a massive geopolitical implication when it comes to China's view.
China will not have not noticed that.
Exactly.
The world was watching that.
And it's that level of detail. You could have said country/regions or country/autonomous provinces, but he said country.
Yeah.
There's
been a lot of diplomatic nuance on that, deliberately to avoid offending. Personally, I'm a big fan of that. Make that clear. Although he hasn't said he would defend Taiwan militarily, so that's a bit of a worry. Okay, there's so much more to talk about. I want to hear from you. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000, particularly after hearing Seb Gorka there, defending the US president and his actions. Made some very strong arguments. I thought particularly about not seeing the US as an economic unit and people as economic units. And I thought that was the biggest argument which the Remain campaign did in 2016 over, we'll be poorer. And actually polling, if we left the EU, and I didn't think we would be, but even if we did, I was still willing to take that. Again and again, the polling showed that it wasn't about the economics. It wasn't. And the argument, we're poorer because we lost this trade deal. People don't care. People want to live in happy, cohesive communities. They want to have jobs. They want to have security. They want to have values, cultural values and things. And people who just talk about money don't get that. And I thought that was really telling when he was talking about people, they want me to treat our country as a nation, as a community, as about people's lives. I thought that was a very, very strong argument. That's going to hit home with a lot of people, not just, as American swing states where they've lost so many jobs over the years, but also with a lot of voters here. Love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
European Union, they're very tough, very, very tough traders. You know, you think of European Union, very friendly. They rip us off. It's so sad to see. It's so pathetic. 39%, we're going to charge them 20%, so we're charging them essentially half. Vietnam, great negotiators, great people. They like me, I like them. The problem is they charge us 90%. We're going to charge them 46% tariff.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, to be Julia Hartley-Brewer. 12:28 is the time. Philip Ingram's still with me as well. Let's get to your messages and your calls. Let's get to some of the messages I've had coming in today about your reaction to those tariffs. Oscar says, but for the far left, I meant to point it out, you know, as a result of Brexit, we got 10% tariff, not 20% tariff. Otherwise, we would have had the EU's 20% across-the-board tariff because of the EU as a rule, as a whole, trading surplus with America from those Trump tariffs. Oscar says, but the far left said there would be zero Brexit benefits. They couldn't possibly be wrong, could they? Yeah. Graham says a great Brexit benefit, though preferably a proper Brexit, would have been appreciated, and the ECHR still dictate and control much of what the UK does. Indeed. Joe says it's not Brexit, it's about a flimsy thing called respect. They're hitting the loudest critics. As a nation, we must pull together and play better. AJ says the first ever positive to come out of Brexit got off with a warning. Next time we won't be so lucky. And Daniel says prices will go up and people will lose their jobs. No winners here. Jennifer says, I would punish the EU more with 40% tariffs. I think they've gotten off lightly. Yeah, I'm with you too. No, I'm not. It's I don't want an economic trade war. I really, really don't. Let's go to the phone lines now. Grace is on the line in Ealing. And Grace, you've got a very different point to make, which I think is very interesting. What do you want to say?
Well, a variety of things. I mean, one of the things that strikes me is hearing a clip yesterday of Trump previously saying that he thinks tariffs are the most beautiful word, more beautiful than love, because tariffs can make the country rich. And that's slightly in contrast to what you were saying a moment ago about how people don't just want economics, they want other things, they want community. And Trump kind of tries to cozy up to Christians, but the Bible says that the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, and you cannot serve money and God. So Trump saying that he just wants to make the country rich, I'm not sure that's a great way forward. But actually, America is richer than the rest of the world. It is rich in terms of... A
lot of Americans don't feel that way. The average American has not seen their cost of their standard of living going up in 20 years.
Well, exactly. That's why he, as the leader of the country, needs to make sure that wealth is more fairly distributed, but he doesn't seem to be doing that. I mean, one of the things I also wanted to say was that it's I think, offensive potentially to some people. Not everyone will be this sensitive, but some people who have actually been victims of rape may find it offensive for him to use that word to refer to what he sees as going on in terms of...
He said the countries that America have been looted, raped and pillaged by other countries. Yeah. Again, I just thought that I mean, again, I don't think the country's been looted or pillaged either. I mean, people have bought their goods, they've bought their goods. I mean, I think it's a ridiculously sort of over-aggressive language. I didn't like him using the word raped. I'd never try and stop him using it. I think people should be allowed to use the words they want and we judge them on it. But I don't like the idea that because someone's been raped, they wouldn't like that and we need to be worried about that. Otherwise, you know, we can't talk about anything. And anyone who's been a victim of anything means that they, you know, I know you're saying that too, but we can't, I don't think we can edit ourselves because someone might have been the victim of a crime at some point.
Yeah, I'm not saying that he can't use the word, but I'm thinking it would probably be better not to.
Yeah, I thought it was a poor choice of words. I thought it was really upping the ante. It was really, I thought it was very much sort of creating a very them and us view about the rest of the world.
Yeah, I mean, didn't he say on one occasion he has all the best words? I mean, if he has all the best words, he should maybe use some better, more accurate ones. There's very, very much a kind of thing against America against the rest of the world, and that's just not particularly helpful. I mean, I heard him mention Bangladesh, for instance, and I just thought, does he really think that the general population, the average person in Bangladesh, is ripping off America? Yeah. America may not be manufacturing as much as it did in the past, but it's still making a huge amount of money from the rest of the world, including via things online, via various systems of banking. There was a report I read a little while ago that showed that there's actually far more money going to the developed world, or coming to the developed world, countries including us and America, than is given in aid, because we're actually still profiting from poorer countries.
Oh, I mean, but also there's loads of evidence. I mean, the evidence is incontrovertible that actually countries that get foreign aid tend to do worse than countries you just allow trade with. And what's interesting is the EU talks good game on this. One of the reasons why a lot of countries in Africa are really quite poor, other than their sort of kleptocratic, hopeless governments in ineptitude, is actually down to the fact they can't sell value-added goods like manufactured goods into the EU because the tariffs are so high, and often they can't even export some of their goods because, of course, we know that might hit, Spanish orange producers and things. And so actually, trade will actually help those countries. Freer trade would help those countries more.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reason I was personally very, very torn during the referendum, because I'm typically more on the left than on the right, and I was not particularly happy with some of the things I was hearing from Nigel Farage, for instance, at the time. So I thought I can't vote on the same side of them, but I didn't want to vote Remain because I thought I don't think the EU is actually particularly helpful to the world's poorest people.
No, exactly. How did you vote in the end, if you don't mind me saying? Feel free not to answer because it's a private ballot.
I didn't. I couldn't decide in the end. I'm still glad that I didn't.
If you had a vote now, what would you do?
Honestly, I'm not sure. I feel like there's so much more I need to learn about economics, but I feel frustrated sometimes that some people on my side of the political spectrum are rightly concerned about people near to us who are in need, or Palestinians who are in need, but they don't necessarily show enough concern about people in the global south other than Palestine who are in need.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, again, that for me ties in with net zero, which is that it's bad enough that net zero puts energy prices up here in the UK and costs jobs and make people can't afford to heat their homes because of the energy prices, but it's even worse that people in developing nations, particularly in Africa, they're being basically told, you can't have fossil fuels, and that's the cheapest way for them to industrialise, to bring themselves out of poverty. And I mean, I genuinely think it's morally obscene that the West is doing that. Grace, such a fascinating call. Thank you very much indeed for calling. Philip Ingram, we've just had a statement from Jonathan Reynolds in the House of Commons, his Business and Trade Secretary. I don't know if he's remembered whether or not he was a solicitor or not today. But the UK government, he says, is launching a consultation with businesses on how to take retaliatory tariff measures against the US. No, about how taking retaliatory tariff measures against the US would impact them. So basically saying, a deal is, the US, he says, is possible and favourable, but the UK reserves the right to take any action it deems necessary if an agreement is not secured. He certainly said on media rounds today that everything is on the table. Given what we just heard from Seb Gorka, who's a White House advisor, this idea that, you can get rid of these tariffs, come to the table, do a deal. Would retaliatory tariffs be a good idea?
No, not in the slightest. And I'm disappointed with what the business secretary said. Once again, he's going out to try and get people's opinions before making a decision. Now, some people say that's good, but we elected government to make decisions. They've had weeks. We've known these tariffs have been coming to turn around and work out what a decision would be and how to react to it. Absolutely. And they could come back in very positively and diffuse the whole situation. Say, of course, we're going to continue our trade negotiations and look at how we can make things fairer between us and the United States.
Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed. Up next, we're going to be talking about why Glasgow has become Britain's asylum capital and why, funnily enough, local people are not happy about it. More cuts to the Metropolitan Police and where have all those barber shops come from on your local high street? That's all coming up. First up, though, it's time to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning Oasis tickets at Wembley this summer, plus £10,000.
How'd you fancy winning tickets to the hottest gig of the century? Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to bag yourself a pair of tickets to Oasis at Wembley this summer. Plus, we're giving away a whopping 10 grand and putting you up for the weekend in a London hotel. All you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 and you're in the draw. Alternatively, you can enter by post. Once again, all you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 or you can enter by post. Good luck.
18 plus UK excluding Northern Ireland. Enter by text for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on the 7th of April 2025. Or post your name and number to Oasis Competition, PO Box 3190. Colchester CO2 8GP to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of April 2025. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion.
Very good luck in that competition. 12:36 is the time. We're going to take a break. I say up next, going to talk about Glasgow being the asylum capital of Britain and what they're going to do about it. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's get straight to our next guest. It's Councillor Thomas Kerr. He's a Reform UK councillor in Glasgow, which has been named as Britain's capital of asylum seekers. Very good afternoon to you, Thomas.
Good afternoon.
Thanks for joining us. I have to say, these figures are absolutely extraordinary. I mean, local officials and indeed local people basically saying, we have had enough, this isn't going to work for us anymore, saying that Glasgow is facing untenable pressure due to the UK's asylum system. The council's homelessness convener has warned that specifically. But 4,000 asylum seekers were sent by the Home Office to the city. Hundreds of refugees with leave to remain travelled there, basically saying, we're homeless. And the Glasgow region, the Glasgow government local government is basically having to deal with this, and indeed the local community. Tell us first of all what the financial pressure is, and then we'll move on to the other pressures.
Well, to put it into context for everybody, Julia, we have 6,735 beds in Glasgow to house homeless people right now. 4,100 of those currently have asylum seekers. This city has declared a housing emergency almost a year and a half ago, and it's not just because of the pressures we're facing from asylum seekers, it's because we have a homelessness epidemic in the city as well. But because of Scottish law, what's happening is a lot of people who have been put up here because of the fact that Glasgow is a dispersal city, and with the leave to remain, they know they can come to Glasgow, say that they're homeless, and Scottish law means that they automatically are housed. It means that Glasgow is becoming a real hub for people who are then coming to Scotland to try and make sure they're claiming asylum.
Well, just clarifying, so why did the Home Office decide to send a lot of people to Glasgow, and do they provide funding for those people? Because we're told this costs the country a fortune. We're spending billions, millions every day and billions every year providing this accommodation for asylum seekers. Does it come out of a central fund? Does it have to come out of local council funding? Where do you get the money from, if at all?
It's a historical thing that Glasgow signed up to be a dispersal city years ago. As you know,
that worked out well for you.
Well, Glasgow has a history of being a very left-wing city, which is part of the problem, and a lot of these politicians inside the building I'm in now live in a different planet and think that this was a good idea because it makes them sound good to people and their voter base rather than actually looking at common sense. In terms of funding, we do get some funding from the Home Office, but it's nowhere near as much as what we need to try and make sure that we're able to accommodate the number of asylum seekers that's coming in. The administration has a very clear view here, though. They could end the fact that Glasgow is a dispersal city. We can turn to the UK government and say enough is enough.
We're done.
The fact that it's a nationalist councillor who is now openly saying that, I think shows you how serious it's became in Glasgow. It's not a reform politician, it's not somebody on the right like me that's now saying this. It's people who see themselves as woke lefties who are fighting for it.
The reality check of it actually happening. And of course we saw that in America, didn't we? We mentioned it a bit earlier on the show, when the Democrats were sort of saying, oh, how awful, how badly these people are being treated. They're coming in over the borders, immigrants from Mexico and South America and wherever around the world. And the likes of Ron DeSantis, the Republican governor of Florida, basically just put them on buses and sent them up to Martha's Vineyard and other places where the rich left-leaning Democrats live. Funnily enough, they didn't like it when it happened to their local communities.
There's a lot that's coming home to roost for a lot of the politicians who have made terrible decisions over the past, God knows, 20 odd years in this city. Labour and SNP politicians who have made horrible decisions, and there's a lot of facts coming home to roost that they're unhappy with when the reality starts up, and communities like mine in the East End of Glasgow are now saying enough is enough. I mean, we had a by-election a couple of weeks ago and Reform got 24% of the vote there. That's because people are sick, fed up. It's not because everybody's all now turned to the right. It's because they're fed up and their community's been overtaken. And I think a lot of these politicians are realising
we've seen that across the UK, we've seen it across Europe, we've seen it in Ireland as well. In terms of the impact on local communities, we know this is one of the things that, again, people say, well, people have to live somewhere, but of course, it's happened in Ireland as well, but in lots of places in England and in Scotland, asylum seekers being housed in a hostel, often, few hundred people put somewhere in a tiny town, massively dwarfing local population, often in hotels, ruining the tourism in the local area because people got nowhere to stay, people's weddings being cancelled and the like. And of course, they're not spending money in local restaurants and local tourist shops and things, so that has an impact on jobs. But there's also that impact of having a whole bunch of young men with nothing to do all day suddenly out and about on the streets. And that is certainly a concern, particularly for young women who are bearing the brunt of this, and loads of women have said this to me, and it's really well documented across Europe as well, the attitude of many of the young men who coming from countries where women are treated as second-class citizens, where a woman who's not covered up is treated as a sex object, and the harassment of young women and the crimes against young women have skyrocketed. Have you seen that problem in Glasgow?
We have. I actually got myself reported to the SNP's new hate crime legislation because I spoke about this. One of the SNP councillors, ironically, the convener who's now complaining was the one who had reported me to the police because he wasn't happy with the fact I said there has been a rise in stalking, assaults and huge crime inside the city centre. A lot of young women feel extremely unsafe, and they are reporting back that the predominantly, now this isn't just everybody, there's obviously people who are from different cultures who are doing this as well. The dominance of this is young men who have travelled up here from asylums, who are claiming to be asylum seekers, and that is a big issue. It's having a massive impact in our local communities, and we have an epidemic going over in Glasgow right now that I've spoke about today, about play parks, where there's people taking photographs of children in play parks across the west of Scotland.
Yeah, that doesn't work for me. If it was my kid.
Right now in Scottish legislation, that's actually not against the law. It's crazy that they can do this, and it's not against the law to take a photograph of someone else's kid in a public play park. This is madness. But that's where we sit now in Scotland. It's absolutely crazy.
Just extraordinary, isn't it? Do you think that you've got the public on your side again, regardless of people's political affiliation? There are a lot of people, they might talk the talk, but actually they'll be saying to their daughters, be careful when you're in town because of this one. Because when the reality bites everybody, and everyone's aware of it. Do you think everyone's still pretending they're not noticing the problem, but they really are?
You know what, I think in Glasgow you're seeing a massive switch around of people who are now finding their voice and being very, very vocal about this. It is scaring politicians inside the city chambers who have for a long time tried to keep these issues hidden and don't let the public talk about it.
And labelling someone as someone who's committing a hate crime by pointing out actual crime statistics.
I mean, before I came on to speak to you, Julia, we have a full council meeting that's taking place where they had a question digged at me, and every one of the politicians clapped to say they welcome refugees and asylum seekers as they tried to point it down at me. And my reaction is, look, the people of Glasgow are with me. The establishment might not be with me, but the people of Glasgow are, because they're sick, fed up with their city being treated the way it is.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, the only thing is, just finally, what's going to be done about it? Because at the end of the day, these people are in the country. People say, well, they've got to live somewhere. What are the options?
Well, I think there's three options that the administration in Glasgow can do. The first one is by saying to the UK government, we can't be a dispersal city any longer. We have to have our fair share going across Scotland, not just to Glasgow. I think the administration here locally can streamline planning applications to make sure we're building more homes, because that's part of the big issue that we have. Investors don't see Scotland as an attractive place to invest, so they don't want to build homes. And lastly, that the Scottish government has to change the fact that in Scotland, if you're an asylum seeker or you claim to be an asylum seeker or a refugee, you're automatically kicked at the top of housing lists.
Over and above local people, indeed.
So it makes a circumstance where loads of people are coming up to Scotland from England because they know they can abuse the system. So those three things are very, very simple. The Scottish government could do very quickly to tackle this issue in Scotland.
Very interesting. Councillor Thomas Carr, Reform UK Councillor in Glasgow, thank you very much. If you're wondering, obviously we can't talk to local councillors who are standing in local elections, but the local elections in Scotland aren't until 2027, which is why we can talk to a local councillor from that part of our great country. Philip Ingram, I mean, these numbers are extraordinary. These are political decisions by the national government and by the local city government. The reality, the impact is felt by people on the street.
Well, very much so, and I think he very articulately put across the change in attitudes that people have got, and that's but how out of touch those that are in positions of power are with the people on the street, and that's not a good position to be in, because that's going to turn into more protests and worse. It'll be fascinating to see.
Forget protests, young women being sexually assaulted and stalked. I mean, let's worry about the really important stuff. Not being unpopular at a local dinner party. 12:48 is the time. Up next, going to talk to a former Met Police DCI about cutbacks at Met Police and why we're having the opposite of cutbacks when it comes to barber shops. There seem to be about 50 on every local high street, but what are they doing there? This is Talk.
since 1999, 101 of our fellow citizens have been murdered by terrorists, of whom 94 out of 101 were Islamist terrorists. That is the kind of risk we can't ignore, and where people like this come through the system, they should be properly risk assessed. And the fact the guy says he has a mental health condition, or maybe even has got a mental health condition, that should not prevent risk assessments being done.
And this is a problem, isn't it, for an awful lot of cases.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, Home of Common Sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. 12:50 is the time. Let's speak now to Mike Neville. He's a former Metropolitan Police Detective Chief Inspector. I want to talk to him about various different issues involving crime and policing. A very good afternoon to you, Mike.
Yes, good afternoon, Julia, and good afternoon to Philip as well.
Oh, yeah, Philip Ingram's here. Another bunch of old mates. I secretly think that Philip knows everyone in the country.
So does Mike.
So, yeah, you're very worrying. I don't want you to gang up on me. Anyway, right, let's talk about it. There's two really big stories I want to talk to you about. Also touch on terror if we can. But the Met Police, apparently our biggest police force, of course, covering London and much of the South East, they are planning to cut services and cut 1,700 officers and backroom staff as they face a £260 million hole in their budget for the coming year. But hold on a minute, didn't we have a load of cuts in the austerity years under Cameron and Osborne? And then we spent the last sort of 5 years trying to build those numbers back up because of the problems of a lack of police officers, particularly in places like London, and now they're going to cut them again. This is insane, isn't it?
I don't know how they can cut police officers because, of course, they're on sort of a 30 or 40-year contract. So they're very difficult to get rid of. They could cut some police staff. But I was proud to be a Scotland Yard detective, Julie, but what you see in the Met is the typical public sector where rather than looking at how we can do things differently as like a business would do, how can we do things differently for less and get a better service? Yeah. It's simply like Birmingham Council, or we'll just take the money and not do much really. Yeah. And when you look at the Met, there is a commander, a chief superintendent and chief inspectors, all employed with 20 or more staff in the diversity directorate. Yeah. Now, these cuts, they talk about cutting the Royal Parks Police, they're cutting forensics, mounted and dog patrols. So let's ask the public, what would you like to see cut here? Yes. Would you like to see the forensics branch and the dog patrol cut? Or would you like the diversity directorate to cut? Because as you've highlighted, the establishment, as we heard from the Scottish guest just before, the establishment likes one thing, but the public like another.
Absolutely. I bet you anything they've got net zero officers as well, net zero compliance officers. I bet you anything at all. Translation services, you name it, they've got it. And again, also, this budget comes out of, there's obviously some national money that goes in from the Home Office, but there's also money from local council taxpayers, and of course that Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, is ultimately our sort of police and crime commissioner for London. We're going to say he's been hiring PR staff on vastly inflated salaries at huge expense. I thought most of us would rather we hired a few police officers instead of some more PR staff to make the Sadiq Khan attempt to look good.
Just an example of a simple change. When I ran a department that identified people who were caught on camera, caught on CCTV catching burglars, robbers, rapists and thieves.
Wait a minute, did we used to do that? Why have we not thought of that before?
Well, but I used to identify about 60% of those people because I had simple systems and but now they identify less than about 25%. So all those images are not identified. All those people who invested time. It's just wrong.
Why aren't they identified?
Because people, they're not looking at these images. They've not got a system for showing the images.
Well, they don't bother collecting. In my experience of crime, they don't bother collecting them. They don't even bother.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I spoke to a criminal. Yeah, about this. Sorry.
No, carry on.
No, I spoke to a criminal, and I caught him for over 40 crimes, linked him together. But when I spoke to the guy, he admitted doing 500 crimes. It's the fact that the police never got the 460 other images in the first place. So these are just simple things. And I say to Mark Rowley, I email him occasionally and say, look, I was proud to be a Scotland Yard detective. I'll come back. I'm not just on here to whinge.
Yeah.
I'll come back and I will help you. And all I get is ignored or told to bugger off, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Your message is important to us, Ali. Well, let me ask you about another area of crime which we would like the police to be tackling, and this is this extraordinary explosion in the number of Turkish barber shops on our high street. Some have got, you know, as many as 20 or 30 premises in our high street. We had a big raid on a string of those shops, the seizure of £500,000 in illegal cash, apparently, and this crackdown on money laundering. I mean, there just aren't that many men who need their hair cut, as far as I can tell, in many local high streets, and yet a huge number of barbershops have popped out of nowhere. Is it fair to assume a lot of these are just money laundering businesses?
Absolutely. I mean, you only have to look at these stats that, you know, between in a decade, there's gone from 6,000 to 9,000 barber shops in London alone. That's a 50% increase. There's 6 times as many barbers opened as coffee shops. It's just incredible. And you know as well as I do that, you know, the National Crime Agency are now saying, oh, they might be involved in money laundering. Well, most people can see that, you know, people are going, you know, 1 or 2 people go in there a day and spend a tenner.
Yeah.
Yet the owners have got 3 flash Mercedes round the back.
Money doesn't add up. I mean, yeah, exactly. But maybe we should get Donald Trump to put tariffs on them. I don't know. Maybe that would work. I don't know. But that's the thing. What annoys me is like, oh, now you're having a crackdown on them. We've been watching them for the last few years. It's clearly helping to fund and deal with the profits of crime. Why does it take them so long?
Well, to be honest, Julia, I get frustrated at this myself. The public sector as a whole, the police, they move as slow as a slug with a heavy shopping bag sometimes. It's just when these things are just obvious, you know, these things are connected to terrorism, trafficking of people, drug dealing, all this sort of things.
Yeah.
And these barber shops are obvious places because the big thing with the barbers is they're not regulated. You can just set yourself up as a barber. You set yourself up as like a food shop or something. The council can come in and check you, hygiene and all this sort of stuff. With barber shops like nail bars and vape shops, American candy shops, you can just set yourself up. And as long as you pay your rent and
your council tax, they're not going to notice. Exactly. Can I just ask you? Mike, really, really briefly, just in 30 seconds. We've got an ex-Abu Hamza accomplice, someone who has been seen to be closely associated with the 7/7 bombers in 2005, which left 52 people dead in London and more than 800 injured. This is Haroon Aswat. He was jailed in the US. He's come back here to the UK, but he's been in a psychiatric hospital. Basically, we've not been able to properly assess him. He has said he's a terrorist. He's told people that he wants to kill Jews, Christians and Muslim enemies. It's not been properly assessed, so he's going to end up being put back on the streets of this country. Just briefly, what do you make of that?
I mean, one highly professional area of policing is counter-terrorism and our security services, but they're overwhelmed, and they've been even more overwhelmed because of stupid decisions where liberal left lawyers have had their dirty fingernails into it, and this just makes us all unsafe. And the state's duty, the first duty of the state, is to protect its citizens, and it's utterly failing by having this man on the streets.
Mike Neville, I wish the Met Chief would listen to you more on everything. Former Metropolitan Police Detective Chief Inspector, thank you for that. His mate Philip Ingram in the studio with us. Again, just go back to barbershops. I mean, this thing, there's just aren't that many people who need their haircuts.
Well, exactly, but it's not just barbershops. You know, it's car washes. We've
nail
seen
bars.
It's nail bars. It's anything where there's cash going through is used for money laundering. And when we see the explosions of them, I'm surprised the police aren't jumping up and down.
Well, this is the thing. It's the fact they wait sort of 5 years until after it's happened before they do something. It's just so frustrating, isn't it? David Bull is here. He's in for Ian Collins again today. Now, you're a man who I think you're very dapper. I'm guessing you get your hair cut very often, but even you don't need 30 barbers on the same high street.
Well, I mentioned this on Friday, actually. I said it's surprising, isn't it, how many barbershops there are. How many times do you need your hair cut? And it is obvious that many of them are empty.
Yeah, exactly.
So what's that about?
It's utterly bizarre.
And, of course, you don't have to register your business as a company. You can be a sole trader. What's that about?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, but it's the police are so far behind it, and now they're going to be cutting numbers. Anyway, I'm assuming you're going to be talking a lot about Trump tax. Where are you on this? I mean, are you disappointed?